Okay, I think we're ready.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I would like to call this meeting to order of the Operations Work Group on Monday, June 13th. Thank you to everyone who is joining us tonight. We will start with public input, written and in person. There were 4 written statements submitted for the June 13th, 2022 operations meeting. The summary is there was 1 submission against the increase in payment for retiree dental insurance, and 3 statements in support of the 4.7 cost of living adjustment and a $5 increase in starting pay for educational assistants, as well as higher pay and better benefits for substitute teachers. And you can read the detailed written comments in board docs under agenda item 2.2. Jesse, do we have anyone registered for public appearances tonight?
We do. The first person is David Mahoney.
Okay. David, are you with us?
I am. Thank you very much. Thanks to the committee for the opportunity to address you.
Great. Thank you so much. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Dave Mahoney. I'm a resident of the west side of Madison, parents of 2 recently graduated, college graduated students. I'm here tonight because of my concern over the shortage of teachers moving into summer and summer school. I come to you as a retired 41-year career law enforcement officer. I spent 41 years with the sheriff's office, the last 15 as Dane County Sheriff. And I know very well the outcomes of kids who aren't in school and aren't receiving a positive education like we provide to our students here in Madison. And I'm concerned about the lack of teachers available this summer to teach. And I would ask this committee for a recommendation and to the full board for support of any program and package needed to enhance teachers teaching this summer, including working with the union to bring in retired teachers if necessary.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks for your time.
Next is Melissa Olander.
All right, Melissa,
okay.
there you go. Welcome, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, so I'm just going to read what I have prepared. So my name is Melissa Olander, as you know, and I'm a speech language clinician at Chavez Elementary School. And I'm here because Madison teachers deserve a cost of living raise and SEAs deserve a $5 raise. Why? Because we give 100% of ourselves each and every day. That means our class sizes are bigger, but we still individualize instruction. Our students have mental health needs, so we counsel them and teach them strategies at the same time we teach the rest of our students. Our students have behavior needs, so we provide behavior support all day long. Our students, we use crisis management strategies to diffuse behaviors that escalate. We meet the needs of our special education students and our English language learners, even with unrealistically high student to teacher ratio. We provide trauma-informed practices so that all of our students don't fall behind or get in trouble. We implement anti-racist practices because Black lives matter. We are culturally responsive so that we can engage students from underrepresented cultures. We teach gender equality to foster the motivation of all students regardless of their gender. We teach social emotional skills so that our students develop a positive self-image and forge relationships with those around them. We collaborate with parents because working as a team makes a difference. We teach student teachers because they are the future generation of teachers. We have a substitute teacher shortage, so we give up our planning time to help out. We just don't work our contract hours. We work after school and on weekends to write and prepare lesson plans, report cards, IEPs, and progress reports. We are fundraisers. We work with our PTO after school to raise money for our school. We are committee members. We serve on committees to make our schools better. We attend staff development to improve our teaching. We take the time to teach and learn new curriculum so that our teaching practices are data-driven. We provide breakfast and lunch in our classrooms this year, which means more cleaning and less downtime. Some of us are coaches and club leaders at our schools. We participate in lockdown drills and cope with the stress of a society that does not put the lives of children first. We are caregivers. We love our students. We comfort them and we challenge them. We are parents and community members. We go home and continue our life after a demanding day of teaching. In addition to all of these responsibilities above and many more, we teach reading, math, science, social studies, PE, music, art, and reach. Yes, we deserve a cost of living raise because teachers are who make a difference in the lives of our students. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have Katie Wildman.
Hi, my name is Katie Wildman, and I have a daughter who just finished 9th grade at Memorial and a son who just finished 3rd grade at Muir Elementary. My daughter's in all honors classes. My son has Down syndrome and receives special education services. On the whole, we've been extremely pleased by the education our kids have received from the excellent teachers and staff at their schools. However, we are concerned about staffing this year and next. When teachers don't have planning periods because they have to sub in other classrooms, they don't have time to adapt and differentiate instruction to meet the needs of all learners in their classroom, no matter how dedicated they are to doing so. They need a cost of living adjustment so that we can retain and attract excellent educators dedicating to teaching all of our students to ensure they also have the time and support to plan and provide feedback to them. My son in particular thrives on routine and continuity. He has an IEP with cross-cat and SEA support so he can access the curriculum in the regular ed classroom, and he thrives in that setting when his supports are in place. When he lost his cross-cat mid-year this year, his gen ed teacher, SEA and SLP stepped up to support him, but it's not sustainable to expect that on a regular basis. We also need a $5 base wage increase for SEAs. My son and many others like him need continuity in order to fully engage in learning. Someone who knows their routine and needs, picks up on nonverbal cues, and has a relationship with them. When there's constant turnover, my son struggles with basic school routines and he is not focused and engaged with learning. When an SEA isn't present, his schedule doesn't get written and he has difficulty with transitions. He composes a story during writing, but it doesn't make it onto paper without a scribe. There's no one to take him to the bathroom, so he doesn't go until his clothes are soaked. He's not learning in that situation. We need a $5 base wage increase for our SEAs to stop losses and attract new support staff who are so important for supporting our most vulnerable learners and engaging them in learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie.
Next is Jennifer Lattick.
Hi, Jennifer.
Yep. Yes, hello, I'm Jennifer Latek, very close on the pronunciation. I am actually an MMSD grad, as well as having 3 students in MMSD district. I have a student who's in the alternative high school, a student at Memorial High School who just finished 10th grade, and a student who, or just finished 9th grade, excuse me, and a student who's going into 8th grade at Spring Harbor Middle School. My students have a variety of issues. I have 2 students who have IEPs, and I have a student of color as well. And they all have struggled this year. They have all, actually this year has probably been the best year so far, but the hard part is that they've all struggled to get back into schooling since virtual schooling. And really that has also been seen through all of the staff. They have tried so hard to engage my students and my children, back into the educational system this year. They have worked so hard and I have seen them bend over backwards. My concern is that between my 2 youngest, I have only a 2-year difference in school. However, I am seeing that the special ed teachers are leaving. I'm seeing the SEA staff isn't able to stay that long. They are just exhausted. They are not getting paid what they deserve. They are not able to stay and sustain with one job. They're having to work multiple jobs in order to make an income to support their own families. I feel like MMSD has always been a destination for other educators to want to come to and join as a workforce. However, in this day and age, All of our other surrounding communities, they're paying teachers and SEAs and administrative assistants and nurses and other staff more money. They're taking our great educators from MMSD. Please, please, I implore you to give our SEAs, to give our support staff, to give our teachers at least a cost of living raise. And please give our SEAs the $5 raise that they so deserve. It has been a very tumultuous year for everybody. Yes. And we really encourage, and I want you to see that this is a really important time for our students. I would really be, I'm not sure how else to put it, but I would be really concerned to see what's going to happen in the next couple of years in education with this next generation coming out if we continue to really lose out on this next generation of teachers, presidents, lawyers, doctors, sanitation workers, nurses, food service employees, everybody that we need in our world to make it successful. We need to pay our educators more money. Please find that small portion in your large budget, which I know is overrun, but please, this has to be the most important thing on the agenda tonight. It's important and imperative for our students. Please give them the cost of living increase that they need. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer.
That was our last speaker.
All right. Thank you to everyone who submitted comments and to everyone who spoke tonight. Next on our agenda is the approval of minutes from May 16th of 2022. And before we do that and vote, I want to do a quick intro of our new school board rep, Joanna Hoskins, who is joining us for the first time and will be voting on the minutes with us. So before she votes for the first time, I want to introduce and make sure we say hello to her. So Joanna, thanks for joining us. All right, and with that, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved. Nikki.
Right. Nikki.
Second, Ali Muldrow.
All right, thank you. And Joanna, your advisory vote.
Yeah, same as them, second.
All right, and all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. All right, and moving on, the next agenda item is, actually, I'm going to do a little sort of preview for the whole rest of the meeting here. The primary focus of tonight's meeting will be the budget update as we move towards the June 27th vote of the preliminary 22-23 school year budget. We will get an update on what has changed since the first budget draft in April, what moving pieces we still need to be aware of as we move to the final budget vote in October, and any additional feedback we have received. We'll discuss amendments that have been submitted by board members and the analysis provided by administration. And I encourage everyone to ask their clarifying questions on the budget, as this is our final discussion before the June vote. Please note that in the budget presentation, there are 22 main slides and 11 appendix slides. And the ones in the appendix we have seen before, and they or have been previously discussed, and include the information on equity and excellence investments, including ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, fund planning, enrollment, and future funding forecast. The other two items on our agenda will receive additional information about the Village Builders proposal, that is a new addition to the budget, and an update on staff recruitment from Human Resources. Before I turn things over to our Chief Financial Officer, Ross McPherson, to start us out, does anyone have any questions? All right, then Ross, I will turn it over to you. Welcome.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you everyone for allowing us to give you guys an update on the budget tonight. Make sure everyone see the slides okay? Great. All right, so this evening, yes, we are headed towards our June 27th, June preliminary vote. And we do want to take the time tonight to update you on a handful of items that have been identified for this June presentation, as well as a discussion of the inquiries and amendments that board members have given us to date. Before I begin, I do want to restate our goals that every child is on track to graduate ready for college, career, and community, that the district and every school in it is a place where children, staff, and families thrive, and that African-American children and youth excel in our schools. Our budget planning approach is cyclical. We continuously update and look through all of our assumptions and forecasts as we begin this process right after completing the prior year budget. So when we do our October vote on the final tax levy and final budget, we start immediately on the next year's budget. So we've been working on this since last November, and we'll continue to work on this until the final preliminary vote in October. We are in the June timeframe for our budget timeline. We are in the final input phase and amendment process review, and we're getting ready for our regular board meeting vote on June 27th. So this evening, I want to give you a few updates on some items that will be in the June preliminary budget book. We've been working consistently since April to rebalance and check all of our assumptions, as well as incorporate some of the new information we're going to discuss tonight. We're going to do a recap of the state budget status and outlook for the future. A brief update on our ESSER plan, including some information tonight from Carolyn Stanford Taylor regarding our Village Builder program. Go through the board member input and inquiries and amendments, as well as any public input we received through our Let's Talk platform. I want to provide everyone an update on our property tax estimate, given the information we received shortly after publishing our April budget book. And then finally, just a brief overview of budget book production and next steps for the budget as we move forward to the rest of this month. So for state and local factors, a lot of this is information you've heard me say before, but it bears repeating, considering that this state budget provided no increase in our primary source of funding that we've been using for the last 25 years, that being the state revenue limits. So revenue limit adjustments per pupil for this year and the 22-23 budget is $0 per pupil adjustment. We have been working with DPI to identify information from our categorical aid programs, and we do have some revised categorical aid estimates we're going to be using for additional revenue anticipated in the June budget vote. Locally, we know we have the third year of our 2020 operating referendum authority, which is bringing approximately $9 million of operating authority online. However, as we've also discussed, the declining enrollment situation, as well as our hold harmless exemptions that we've been receiving for the last several years, is eroding our authority to leverage all of that at once. In the April budget book on page 11, I highlighted this chart, which is a brief overview of our operating funds for General Fund, Fund 10, and our Special Education Fund, Fund 27. On here, there's been a handful of changes since the April budget book production, which is shown here. I want to highlight a few things, most notably that the increase in local resources is due in part by addition of TID closure revenues that we anticipate for next year. Back in earlier this spring, we had some discussions regarding the referendum and potential outlooks for overages in that program. And that revenue is now reflected here, which we will be reserving for future offsets of those overages in the referendum. Additionally, state and federal resources of revenue are adjusted here as well. The change in state revenues reflect a change in our categorical aid programming, categorical aid estimates, but the majority of the federal revenue increases shown here, 49%, are exclusively related to the federal one-time ESSER dollars, which we'll be discussing more in a few minutes. On the expenditure side, there has not been a lot of change since April. The only addition significant to this discussion is the addition of the TID closure revenues that we're holding for referendum overages, which will be appearing in this chart as well. As an overview of what we discussed since our discussions since January, our operating initiatives in our budget for 22-23 include the following operating initiatives. We are doing a full day 4K expansion after the pilot from this year, adding an additional 5 FTE for classroom sections. We are doing targeted instructions and supports throughout, including 6.1 FTE in library media staff, 0.4 FTE targeted for Avid expansion at Weston Memorial, 4.0 targeted credit recovery at each high school. We're also going to be improving our student to staff ratios and supporting mental health of our students, including 9.4 additional FTE for social workers. And planning for the future, we've added an additional 10.0 FTE for unallocated resources, which was done through reductions at central office, including 6.5 reductions of FTE. Another restatement of something that has been guiding our budget work the entire year is that for the 22-23 budget planning, we knew the majority of our work was going to be initiated using one-time funding due to lack of state resources. In April, we shared the full list of excellence and equity projects with the board and provided a more detailed version in the ESSER plan for 22-23. These slides are included as the appendix to this presentation, as well as in the April budget book and June budget book. All focus of spending on ESSER for 22-23 and beyond reflect a surge strategy in staff, goods, and services that are designed to expire once our ESSER awards are exhausted. For future state budget decisions will greatly impact how we plan for the future after this funding expires. As a reminder, this one-time money has come in 3 phases to the district, including 3 distinct ESSER awards. The first of these awards was ESSER 1, and was referred to as GEAR, or the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, which is directed by the governor. The second of which is ESSER 2, which was the Coronavirus Response Relief and Supplemental Appropriations Act, and ESSER 3, or the American Recovery Plan Act. In total, this is not a small sum of money, easily over $70 million. And the planning and use of these funds has been the core of our budget planning work for this year and beyond, and it will be for the next couple of years. All of our ESSER planning, including all the reinvestments from the ESSER $2 in the current year budget and the ESSER 3, which we'll be spending for the first time after July 1st, are guided by 5 primary areas in the grant guidance: preparedness and response, for example, PPE or sanitation; outreach and services for special populations; ELLs, IEPs, and learning loss, addressing learning loss; educational technology, including devices, software, infrastructure, and cybersecurity; addressing long-term school closure, including additional LTE staff, food service, or software; and mental health services and supports for students and staff. As an update, which we'll be talking about after this presentation, we do have an update to one of our core items from April. That being that in April Operations Work Group, we included some identification of the Governor's Award. As a reminder to the board, this was funding that was identified after the approval of the 21-22 budget. The governor released a supplemental amount of money in December of this current school year, which is now going to be assigned out of our fund balance for the following programs: family, student voice and engagement, establishment and programming for the Department of Engagement, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, a multicultural student summit, and Black excellence funding for the next year. For June, I want to highlight that we are currently working on an initial staffing plan for the EDEI group, including an additional targeted support strategy for ATSI schools, village builder programming, and student coaches. Additionally, we're going to be seeking to add additional family liaisons following our community school model out of Fund 80. The total of these two include just over $2.4 million and will be also tied to the surge strategy that will sunset at the conclusion of the 23-24 school year. That being said, the schedule that will appear in more detail in the back of the budget book is now revised to include those amounts. And right now, the current ESSER schedule for 22-23 is $41.8 million. This is to allow for additional funding in 23-24 to maintain the current level of staffing identified in the plan put forward so far. The board amendment process and public input is now concluded. We've had the feedback process open during May of 2022. All of the public feedback has been collected through our Let's Talk platform, but the portal is still open for additional comments. Board members have been submitting their inquiries and amendments to me for the last month, and I want to go through some of those tonight. Before we begin, I do want to identify that all of these amendments, we've been working closely with the board to address as many of these as we could prior to the June budget presentation and the June vote later this month. And we're going to continue to work with the board on these and other items between now and the October vote. For public input, we definitely saw the following 3 themes used most often: clear interest in referendum updates and clear communication on construction timelines and progress updates of the referendum, growing concern around staff vacancies and unfilled positions, and a clear concern about national impacts of inflation and investment in staff wages. Moving on to board amendments, the following amendments were submitted prior to the meeting tonight. And I want to give a brief overview of some of the themes and identification of areas where we're trying to make additional investments. So board member Vandermeulen has indicated that she had asked the board to present options resulting in decision-making around ability to reduce tax levy and or address compensation for staff during 22-23. And we have been working with the board on some of these options, including the additional revenue authority from amended DPI categorical aid estimates. And these are currently being considered for inclusion in the June budget book later this month. Board member Nichols has identified a desire to expand our driver's ed programming. We can certainly make this a part of our ESSER planning for summer 2023 as we get closer to the end of next school year. I do want to highlight, though, that anything we do for 2024 would not be part of this amendment process, but should be part of our 23-24 budget development. However, at that point, we'll be nearing the end of those ESSER awards, and we need to understand that it's possible that funding may not be available during that summer period. Board member Gomez-Schmidt has two amendments on here. The first of which is to ask the administration to investigate the desire for a district-wide athletic director. At present, we have 4 athletic directors at each of our comprehensive high schools, with 1 serving as a lead athletic director. If we're going to entertain an amendment like this, we would need to first establish if this is going to be just an add of the athletic director, or if it's going to establish an entire office of athletic supervision within the administration office. But at present, we do not have a funding source identified to process this amendment, but we can continue to work on these throughout the summer if this is where the board wants to go. Next, a director of multilingual programming, desire to add an FTE to oversee the direction of multilingual ELL and DLI programming. This is another area of which we would need to identify our work streams and work with the 2 teams that have been created to address our EL students in the past year. The former OMGE work streams and department were split across the curriculum and instruction and state and federal program offices. While we don't have a clear path to implement this at present, we are currently working on identification of a position that we may be able to repurpose for this if this is where we want to go. And finally, board member Simkin has indicated desire for a bonus structure that would be an ongoing source for staff bonuses. The only issue with this amendment right now is that positions are budgeted based on their purpose in the staffing plan and their funding source. Different funding sources can't necessarily be pooled for use in this manner. However, I'll continue to apprise the board about any projected savings in the budget that we could use to identify bonuses, and we could pay any said bonuses out of existing salary accounts for each employee. All right, with that, I do want to provide a brief update to the tax forecast for the June budget vote. Since April, we know that there was some preliminary data released from the city assessor's office regarding average property value. And at present, we are estimating that the equalized value change for next year will go in line with the assessed property value. For reference, the city assessor's office identified that the average home value will be increasing at a 12.4% rate for the next year. This past year, as the board may remember, the Department of Revenue indicated that the overall equalized value for the city of Madison was going down last year. We are expecting this to come through as a correction in the numbers this summer. So at present, I don't want to indicate either way if there's going to be a change in equalized value that's different from the home value, but I do think that a correction is in order given the fact that we know that inflation is certainly affecting all property areas as well as our pocketbooks, and the equalized value is likely to increase in kind. Also, the tax levy has been updated here to reflect a change in position for a loss in equalization aid. In the April budget book, we identified that aid loss was projected at 10% based on where we are at present and where state guarantees are moving. I've updated that to a 4% loss, and we certainly could see an improvement on that come fall once we determine how other districts have performed this year in their spending. So at this point, the average homeowner impact at a 12.4% change in equalized value and revenue, 12.4% change in average home value and equalized value will show an average home impact of $105.80, including a drop of almost $1 in the mill rate based on this information. The levy increase at this point is showing a 2.77% increase, which is almost a quarter of what the property value is doing. Just a quick breakdown of what the factors that are increasing our levy looks like. The assumption currently in our revenue limit is that we're using the maximum revenue authority, including an equalization aid loss of 4%, a modest enrollment loss of 150 students in the 3-year average, which is still catching up from the prior years during COVID. Increased payment to voucher programming is certainly part of the tax levy increase this year, including about $350,000 for voucher payments. And again, indicating there's a tax base growth of 12.4%. So the mill rate, as I said previously, is going to be going down almost a full $1 from $10.42. I'm sorry, $11.40 down to $10.42. And with that, if there's any questions or areas we want to provide more information, I can certainly start to enter, or we can start there.
All right, thank you so much, Ross. Appreciate the presentation and appreciate the updated information where we're at with the budget. Is there, can we start, I'm wondering if this might be helpful, is to start with general questions about the budget and the moving pieces we've seen, and then discuss the amendments that have been proposed by board members? Does that help, or does that sound good, Ross?
Yes, that's fine. Sorry, I didn't realize you were
Okay.
introducing that to me.
Yeah. All right. Does anybody have any questions to start? Ali, you look like you have a question.
Thanks so much for your presentation, Ross. Chris, I actually have several questions. Specifically, I am curious about the board's ability to increase the dollar amount that our hourly wage earners are receiving right now. I was recently at Ian's Pizza. Ian's Pizza is offering people $1,000 signing bonus and $20 an hour. $5 an hour increase is what MTI is advocating for. Ross, where in our budget are we prioritizing our hourly wage earners?
So as part of the work we're doing right now, we are investigating options to look at our hourly wage. We are currently still in negotiations at present, so I can't discuss too much of that in this space, but I do want to indicate that we are actively looking at ways we can fund an hourly staff or hourly wage increase for those staff members.
Thank you, Ross. My other question is about the long-term forecast in terms of, a few years ago, Andrew Satz said to this board repeatedly that Madison anticipates a growth of about 60,000 people and 1,500 additional students. Now, if we got those 1,500 additional students, we'd kind of be recovering, students that we've lost, over the course of the pandemic, as well as the impact of a lower or lesser birth rate in 2019 and 2020. Can you talk to us about kind of how that's coming together in terms of how we navigate our long-term budget, or the reality of our long-term budget?
Well, many of the projections that Andrew presented in the past, of course, have been interrupted by COVID. And a lot of our long-range projections are currently tied to the information we know now from rather low birth rates, not just during the pandemic, of course, as those kids would not be in our schools at present, but those that we knew from earlier years, 2017, 2018, that are starting to come through the system now. We lost approximately 5% of our enrollment between March of 2020 and next school year that's projected. Our ability to recover from that is yet to be seen. It has certainly been slower for Madison than some of our surrounding areas, and that may be due to a number of factors, but we do know that COVID and desire for different learning alternatives and strategies for our parents and students has caused us to lose quite a few students. Other than that, I can't speak specifically to long-term strategies around the enrollments, other than we are certainly looking forward to some area of normalcy around our enrollment for the foreseeable future.
Beyond the conversation around enrollment, Ross, as Madison continues to grow, we do see an increase in our tax base. And that's something that is happening currently in terms of, kind of mass construction across our community. Can you talk about the immediate impact of, the development that is driving up the property value in Madison?
So the property value is certainly affecting our ability to control our tax levy. One of the primary sources we use to fund our district through state aids and tax levies are certainly being challenged by the fact that we have more property value per student than most of our surrounding areas. In fact, most of the state. We are currently aided at about 10% of our shared cost, where other districts are much closer to the 2/3 average the state has been striving for years. The additional property value that we add in Madison certainly helps spread out our tax impact that we currently levy to all of the people in our municipalities. But our ability to control that is tied very closely to not only the revenue limit and aid formulas, but how fast that development occurs. I would like to see the state funding formula shift such that we're not looked at only as an ability to pay district, meaning that because of our value per student, the state insists that we do a lot of our fundraising through our tax levy as opposed to through direct state aids.
Thank you so much for speaking to that, Ross. That's all my questions for now.
Okay, thank you, President Muldrow. Do we have any other questions on the budget pieces that Ross presented? Sabian. Board Member Castro.
Thank you, Ross. Thank you, Board Member Gomez-Schmidt. Ross, I had a similar question to my colleague. I'm wondering if you can help explain to us in the community how the dynamic that Madison has one of the highest growth in properties in the whole state, and yet we are a district with a significant number of students that experience poverty, I think above state average, how that dynamic impacts the state formula.
You bet. So it is correct that we are sitting at just over 50% high poverty in our municipalities. The irony of that is that since we have so much property wealth in our district, we don't see much state aid directly from the state. But even though we have one of the highest property values per pupil ratios in the state, we still qualify for high poverty aid as well. The dynamic of that doesn't make a lot of sense, but the way the formulas are currently showing is we receive an additional form of aid called high poverty aid that comes off the revenue limit at about $1.7 million each year. So combine that with the minimal 10% aid that we're getting right now, and it really does seem a little bit odd that we're aided at those levels.
Got it. Thank you so much. And I just want to appreciate my board colleague Muldrow for showing the concern for our staff in the district that are paid on a per hour basis, and want to explore all options that the board can intervene to improve their wages for us, because they do really important work. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Castro. Board Member Vandermeulen. You are on mute.
Sorry. I thought Michelle was before me, but I could go. What I was going to say was my main concern in the budget is always going to be our SEAs, our staff, our teachers, because that's what makes a school. It almost may have watched my face during the hearing the comments about the child with the individual with Down syndrome who doesn't have an aide to help him get to the bathroom all the time due to staff shortages. That's crushing. It's absolutely crushing to hear that in a public school. And it did bother me. I'm going to be 100% honest. I think we have to do absolutely everything in the power to make sure we're taking care of our workers, especially those who work with students with special needs, English language learners, and individuals who both behavioral, not just behavioral, but actual psychological needs. We're not doing enough on mental health. We've ignored it for too long, and now it's coming back to us, and this board has the ability to change that. I want to thank Ross for really working with us to try and find a way to find these funds. I am not a budget guru. I've said that since the beginning, but I will say this: anything I can do anything that can be done to raise those funds, I would be eternally grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Vandermeulen. Board Member Nichols.
Yes, thank you. Ross, also I want to express thank you for your hard work on, kind of constantly updating the budget, and appreciate getting an update on the new categorical aid updates, which will increase our revenue. In all fairness, I know that you're working with the board, and the board has some interest in how those categorical aid dollars might be used, particularly when several of us, including myself, did submit amendments related to finding ways to address hourly wage or base wage and or bonus structures. So something around our employees, but I won't go into that now. My question is, when you see the revenue come in like it did now between April and June that we were not anticipating, if we make decisions about how to use those funds, can you talk about whether or not there will be an impact the following year, or how does the categorical aid anticipation of the amount come in each year, and, you know, just so that we're making an informed decision?
Sure. So I'll try and take that in order, but essentially categorical aids do not function within the revenue limit. Categorical aid by definition is a reimbursed aid for money we've already spent. So what I alluded to earlier in the presentation was that we have an updated categorical aid estimate for our special education aid, which in short has been prorated for several years based on state appropriations. So many times in the past, we've discussed, we've seen information come out in the newspaper or even directly from DPI indicating that an estimated percentage reimbursement for special education is 30%, right? That's been a number that I know has been around the last couple of years. In reality, the reimbursement rate that we actually receive is reduced from 30% based on the total pot of money that is available in the state budget. So when categorical aid programs are set up, the state budget declares an amount. That amount is to serve all 426 school districts in Wisconsin. Based on submitted costs at year end, they have to make that pot fit. So even though their desire based on their estimate of that pot says they can reimburse 30%, by the time we submit our annual reports in August and we get our categorical aid the following year, we may be at 27%, 26%, depending on, again, the number of costs submitted by all districts and the availability of that pot to be divvied up in the same pie. So that's part one. The update that we saw today was due in part to the fact that because the 21-23 budget was approved so late, in fact, it occurred after the beginning of the 21-23 state budget, we had a delay in our estimate for the 2021 school year that caused a unexpected categorical aid to appear last year. In the current year, that categorical aid estimate was again repeated at an incorrect threshold. So now that we have that information, we know to expect a higher reimbursement percentage than we've seen in the past. As far as your first question, which now I'm going in reverse order, how we plan for the future, what we incorporate with that money now is sustainable in the short term, but it will require us to re-examine in future state budgets that pot of money for categorical aid programs is moving in tandem with the new reimbursement percentages that we're now able to predict. If we don't see our continued investment at the state level in those pots, that percentage may start to fall again. But that's conjecture at this point, but it is encouraging to see that we're getting closer to the reimbursement rates that have been established in state budget, at least currently.
Okay, thank you for that. Can I just do one quick follow-up, Chair? Okay.
Yes.
So on slide, I think it's 11, where you showed us the updated chart that's in the budget book on page 11.
Yes.
I can see where the percentages have gone up in accordance to the new categorical aid estimate coming in at a higher amount.
Mm-hmm.
I also see, though, that for some reason, business administration services went from a negative 2.54% in April up to a 10.48.
Correct. Yep.
Can you explain that?
Yep. That is exclusively the TID payout revenue for the referendum overages that we're holding. So we added $7.5 million of anticipated TIN revenue in the local sources and 7.5 into anticipated construction. Construction falls under the function code 2.5, which falls under business services. So that's why that number moved since April to June.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Mhm.
And then the percent increases around instruction in terms of our expenditures, in your mind, are those increases directly tied to the categorical aid increase?
No, they're not. Actually,
Okay.
the regular instruction category is all of our what's called undifferentiated curriculum and regular instruction, the 1.1 and 1.2 function codes in the Woofer coding manual. This applies mostly to building level investments, either due to staffing, formula budgets, or anything other that affects the building level.
Okay, well, I'll just end by saying that like my colleagues, Board Member Castro, Board Member Muldrow, Board Member Vandermeulen, Board Member Simkin. I know that there is a lot of interest in making sure that any opportunity that we have to use funds towards our employees as to retain as well as attract is something that we want to prioritize. So I know there's more to come on that, but I just wanted to state that. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Nichols. Board Member Simkin.
Thank you. I would like to actually start where Board Member Nichols let off, which is that I'm experiencing as a new board member that there is a very strong commitment to for the board to be putting as much money into the staffing costs for staff that are directly touching what's happening in the classrooms. And Ross, what I'm wondering if you could do, after doing a wonderful orientation with you, I understand a little bit of the jargon that you're using. But I'm also aware that there's a lot of people out there that are paying a lot of attention to this and haven't had the opportunity to do an orientation with you. Mm-hmm. And so what I'm wondering is, can you, in simple layman's terms, describe the impact of moving funds that we have now in the budget into reoccurring funds that would have to increase year by year? What is the long-term impact that the school district would be looking at essentially by moving funds from where they are now when they're not in a salaried category into a salary category?
I may ask you to repeat part of that, but I think what you're asking is what happens when we take recurring dollars in the budget and apply it towards staffing? What does that do for long-term projections?
And not only the reoccurring dollars, but also these ESSER funds. So I think that there's a lot of confusion out there around what might happen if we do that. And I'm wondering, in the simplest terms you can come up with, if you can walk us through that.
Okay, let me know if this is what you were asking. If not, I'll certainly give it another shot. So one of the major challenges we've had in this budget cycle, unlike many other budget cycles I've been part of here at Madison, is we typically have a pattern of recurring authority from the state, normally given to us through our revenue limit, that allows us to plan for existing and future services. That may involve staff increases, that may involve additional equity projects, which we try and do each year to move the district in a new direction. Those recurring dollars become part of funding we can rely on coming from the state every year through a combination of state aid and tax levy that we can use to do programming. But the way that formula works is it's based exclusively on our student count from year to year and how that changes over time. You get more students, you get more money. If you lose students, your base starts to fall. When that happens, it's a way for the state to basically allow you time to plan for that change to occur. But the additional complexity in this year's budget, actually the past 2 years, I'll say, is that we have one of the largest, I'll take that back. We have the largest single one-time source of funding coming into the district that we're being asked to spend in a very short time frame, being, of course, ESSER. But that it doesn't end with ESSER. There's a number of these programs that are coming in from the state, from mental health initiatives, health services programming, that's coming to us in the forms of one-time grants, competitive grants, safety and security grants, which we've had in the past 5 years. Those funds come to us like a check from grandma. I'll say it like that. You get the money once, and once you spend it, it's gone. So the danger is, and I think this is what you were asking, Board Member Simkin, is what happens if we take that one-time money and apply it to our operating costs? Is that accurate? Okay. The danger of that, of course, is if you were to use those types of funds to put towards operating costs, the following year, not only is that money gone, but your base is now including and relying on that one-time funding. So you've created one hole already, and any increases you do are now calculated on that base. So you have the first hole from the one-time funding use and whatever you plan for the following year. So that's the real danger about all these one-time funds coming in, is we're being asked to spend them meaningfully and intentionally. But what a lot of people are being asked to do is make this part of their operating cost with the trust that in 2 years, that operating funding is just going to come back somehow. And I think that's a very dangerous way to do budgeting right now. I would love to think it's possible, but at the present, I would not bet my life on it.
Thank you.
Did you have any other questions, Board Member Simkin?
I do not.
Okay. Board President Muldrow.
Thank you so much, Board Member Gomes-Schmidt, and thank you so much, Board Member Simpigan, for your last question. I do think making sure that the general public can follow the conversation is really important. And I think to that end, I want to clarify that my conflict of interest stops me from voting very specifically to the unit that my partner is a part of. So my partner is a teacher, he works in a specific unit, and he's not an hourly wage earner, which is one of the reasons why I can signal pretty clearly at this meeting that I'm really deeply vested in our ability to substantially shift how we're compensating hourly wage earners. And I'd really like to see our board get behind as great an increase as possible so that folks are making a living wage when they are SEAs, when they are security assistants, when they are secretaries. There are all kinds of people in our district who we need desperately, who are really struggling to pay their bills, to put gas in their cars. And it's something we have to prioritize as a board. I greatly appreciate that MTI has prioritized hourly wage earners and is advocating for a $5 increase. But I want us to talk through what it looks like and means for us to get behind that. So I guess, Ross, I am curious, what is the total impact to our budget were the board to unilaterally make the decision to give a $5 increase to our hourly wage earners?
Based on some preliminary work we've done in discussion of that topic, I know that it would cost us approximately $3.3 million to do a $5 increase, which is currently more than is available in the numbers I'm working with, but it is something we are constantly going after and looking at to see how far we can get once we get further into the budget process.
Yeah, so that would be an additional $3.3 million investment in compensating staff, particularly our lowest paid staff. And I do think, I really appreciate the work you're doing, Ross, to kind of configure how we will be able to do that or how close we can get to that. And I look forward to you updating us on that. When can the board anticipate that you all will kind of understand to what extent we can fit that increase into the budget?
So we're working on our discussions with MTI right now in regards to negotiations, but we will continue to update the board. I know we met with MTI leadership again in the past week, and we will be meeting with the board hopefully soon to update them on any new developments.
Thank you so much for that update, Ross.
Thank you, Board President Muldrow. And I guess one of the things I really appreciate all the questions from board members, clarifying the process and clarifying the interest of the board. And I think it's really important, and maybe Ross, you can explain this a little bit better, but when we're in negotiations and due to Act 10, what we can negotiate with our union is the base wage. And so just the public knowing, I think people have asked me, why can't the board respond? And it's because we're in the middle of the negotiations with our union, and it's really important. I think for people to understand that. And I am hearing loud and clearly from all of you, and I think we're hearing loud and clearly from the public, the investment that is needed in our staff. I think people are concerned about retention and, concerned about attracting staff to our district. When people have choices of where they're going to work, we want them to come and work in MMSD. So I just want to also say that I'm hearing that loud and clear for the board. But Ross, maybe you can explain just a little bit more about the negotiations.
I will do my best without getting ourselves into dangerous territory, but yes.
Thank you. I just from a process standpoint,
yes,
I think just a process standpoint is what I'm asking for clarification.
Yep. So many of us do remember that Act 10 was implemented back in 11/12. Forgive me if I have the time frame wrong, but that's when I remember. And as part of that, the only item that we're able to negotiate directly with represented units is regarding base wage. So while we may be looking at other areas to address in the budget outside of base wage, because we're currently in that process right now, any other adjustments we would like to discuss around compensation, we need to be a little careful what we discuss in open session, just because it does put us in the territory and area of violating Act 10.
All right. Thank you for that clarification.
Mm-hmm.
Board President Muldrow, was that the end of your questions, or did you have something to add?
I apologize. I forgot to take my hand down electronically. I haven't done this in a while from home. So thank you for calling on me again. And I think Laura and Nikki do actually still have their hands up.
Yes, I do see that. Thank you so much. Board Member Vandermeulen. Oh, you are on mute.
Yeah, you would think, sorry, you would think after 2.5 years, I would figure out how to use the mute and not. Someday that will happen. Today it is not that day. Very, very simply, I need to stress the reason I'm also speaking is for the $5 for the hourly staff is this. I don't know, I can only speak on what I went through at special ed, and I know many other people went through different things. Without the hourly assistants, without the aides, without the individuals who worked on an hourly basis, I'm not here. I'm not where I am, period. I would not have an education. And you have to understand that that's something I take incredibly seriously. I learned to write through not just a teacher, but through an OT, one who wasn't who was hourly before I could get a full-time OT, because insurance costs are still insurance costs, and I'm still a teacher's kid. We did the best we could, but I had the privilege of being able to afford that. How many didn't? So what we need to do is this. We need to prioritize the $5 an hour, and we need to prioritize paying our staff what they're worth, because otherwise we could have the most anti-racist, wonderful school district in the world, and we won't attract a single teacher. We won't attract a single individual. Act 10 was a very dark day. It passed on June 29th, 2011. Some of us will, the majority of us will never forget that day that it happened. However, that doesn't mean we can't be creative. And it doesn't mean we can't find ways to support our staff. Additionally, if you offer something to everyone, then it most likely does not violate Act 10, because that involves collective bargaining. If the same thing is offered to everyone, it's not bargaining. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Vandermeulen. Board Member Simpkin.
Thank you. So Ross, I'm going to ask another clarifying question around what Act 10 allows us to do and what it doesn't. I guess I'm going to preface that by saying that one of my biggest interests and I guess areas of concern is not just attracting new staff, but retaining the staff that we have and doing everything possible that we can to do that. And I'm learning very quickly that there are these limitations on what we're able to do, which I think is extraordinarily frustrating. In a discussion that we were having, I heard that there is a limit to how much money we are allowed to raise salaries up to related to Act 10. And I'm wondering if you can give a little clarity around that.
Sure. So the one thing in Act 10 that we're allowed to continue to negotiate on is the change in base wage itself. Typically, base wage refers to the starting rate of a salary schedule or whatever compensation structure you have. But the limit to which we can bargain right now is tied to the Consumer Price Index, or CPI. Those figures are published by the WERC, Wisconsin Employment Relations Commission, constantly. And the 12-month average effective July 1st of a given bargaining year is what's used as the ceiling for negotiations around base wage. So in the past couple of years, that threshold has been well below 2%. This year, due to inflation, we're currently looking at a ceiling of 4.7%.
Does that include the steps and ladders?
No, it does not include steps and ladders.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Nichols.
Okay, one last clarifying question at this point. Ross, I can see from your presentation, again, the percent increases and the total revenue moving from, it looked like 490 million in April up to 503. Is that correct?
505. Oh, I'm sorry, revenue is 503. Yes.
503. So that's a $12 million difference.
Correct.
Right?
Not quite. There. So if you're asking specifically about the changes in revenue, the big changes are the increase in categorical aid and the increase of the TID revenue, which is just over $11 million at this point. But the other changes, we've had some adjustments to other grant programs that have been not material to this discussion, but the major increases are tied to the categorical aid increases and the TID revenue.
Okay, so can you just share what is the amount of the categorical aid?
Currently, we're estimating an increase in our award of about $3.5 million.
So 3.5. Okay. All right. So just can you just, well, I don't know if you can clarify, but you made a statement not too long ago when President Muldrow asked what would the cost be to cover the $5 increase or any kind of living wage increase for hourly employees. You said it would be about 3.3 million.
Correct.
And you said that is more than the number that you're playing with, so to speak. But technically the categorical aid is 3.5 million, right? And the TID is already kind of earmarked for other expenditures, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So there's 3.5 coming in, and it could generally cost 3.3 if we were to cover some increase at the hourly rate. Is that correct?
Correct.
Oh, okay. I'm not saying, I know you're not saying using all of the funds necessarily that way, but I just wanted to get a ballpark figure of the categorical aid amount coming in. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Nichols. One of the things I would like to point us back to, and I think Ross has done a really good job of highlighting this for us as we have moved through the budget process since January, and it was in the slide again this year. It's the zero revenue limit per pupil adjustment for us is really difficult. It limits what we are able to do going forward. And with a declining enrollment, this is a really challenging budget situation for us going forward. And so figuring out how to balance the desire and the need to support staff with being fiscally responsible for the budget years that are coming down the road is a really difficult balance, because we really don't know what increases we're going to get. And looking at again, that revenue projection in the budget appendix, if you look at that again, a couple years out, even next year out, that revenue is flattening, and our expenses don't flatten when we add to our operating costs. And so I just think trying to keep that in mind as we're having discussions and understanding that our staff are our priority in this district, and over 80% of our budget is spent on our staff. And to me, I hear everybody, echoing the need to support and attract and retain our staff. And I just want to also balance that out with the fact that the declining enrollment and the zero per pupil increase in funding makes it really difficult to fit it all together. So thank you. I want to go to Joanna really quick. Joanna, do you have any questions as we're sort of moving through this process and discussing the budget? I know you're sort of entering this, as your first meeting. And so it's a little challenging to put all the pieces together, but is there any questions that you want to ask?
Right now, not at the moment, because I feel like all the questions I did have prior were already answered. So not right now, but thank you though.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Ross, I guess one of the questions I have is with the budget amendments that were submitted, which of those do you feel like, should we discuss those? Do you want us to give you feedback on the analysis that you have provided, or how do you see this working with the budget vote that we're taking at the end of the month?
Right. So the amendments as they were presented tonight are not necessarily incorporated as written. In fact, while we are certainly looking at doing some movement on our negotiation strategy, as the board has been briefed on, we certainly have the ability to entertain some of these amendments between now and the October budget vote. I do want to preface that if we are able to identify how the board may want to move on any of these amendments, we can discuss those all the way up until October. There's not a need for them to be incorporated into June at this point. As indicated in the slide deck, there are certainly some of the amendments that require some additional review of work streams before we incorporate them. But if we do need to have more feedback, we can do that here, or we can do that in a weekly update process, or I'm happy to meet with any board member that wants to discuss those more.
Nikki, I see your hand. Board Member Vandermeulen. And you're on mute still. There you go.
Yes. I know in the past we have, one time we voted ahead of time of which ones would go in to the June primary budget. Another time we just read them in and voted on the floor. Personally, I like the second one better, to be 100% honest. But have we decided and how we are going to deal with that as a whole?
Are you addressing that at me?
Yes.
Okay, just making it. So some of the amendments that were written, if we were to do them on the floor in the June budget vote, would be very difficult, as some of them do not have identified funding sources. So anything that we take action on would have to have an identified funding source before we can act on them. I do want to signal, though, that if any amendments were to be entertained that would affect the motions we'd be taking to approve the budget the same night, we would likely be forced to do a recess to allow me to try and rebalance anything we're attempting to do within those parameters.
All right. I appreciate, because I think I might actually enter mine in if possible. So if you could calculate, that would be great.
So I think what you're saying, Ross, is the difficulty is if you don't know ahead of time what that would be, it's really difficult to recalculate the budget motions as written on the floor because they're really detailed in the dollar amount that we are approving.
Right, and any amendment that does not have an identified funding source, we could not act on, as I would not be able to incorporate them with existing parameters.
Okay. So I think what we need to clarify going forward is what would be possible to act on before that budget vote and what needs to be carried out for further discussion and further analysis. Is that correct?
Yes. And again, these are not decisions we need to explicitly incorporate into the June discussion. We certainly have the ability to discuss these between now and October.
Okay, and from my understanding, I mean, just from a staffing standpoint, if you're hiring another staff person, the only cadence that I can see there is being able to hire someone along the way and not in the mid-year, next year after the October budget is
Correct.
approved.
So long as we have a funding source identified, we can still implement over the summer and act on it in the final budget.
Okay. Board Member Nichols.
Yes. So Ross, for the amendment that I put in for the expansion of the driver's license education program, I identified a funding source, which was ESSER. However, I don't have any idea of how much that program costs now. And so when I use the word expansion, I didn't exactly know how to quantify that. Is there some further analysis that we could discuss between now and October to see if that's a viable amendment?
Yes, we would need to clarify the scope of what you're asking to do. For those unaware, that we currently partner with Dane County to do a driver's ed program. We don't run the program ourselves. From what I understand, the desire would be to expand this to advantage more students to leverage the program while we have ESSER. I've been working with our state and federal programs office to identify if this is ESSER applicable, and it certainly should be. We would just need to get that scope clarified of what that would look like for the next year and possibly 2024.
When you say the scope, so are you asking me as a board member?
I mean, we will work with you, but I need to work with who's currently administrating that driver's ed program to get more information.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you, Board Member Nichols. I guess I will just take a quick minute to clarify the two amendments that I submitted. One was to add a certain amount of FTE for a district-wide athletic director. I did want to clarify that we already have someone serving in that role, and is Jeremy Schlitz, who is the athletic director at Memorial, is also serving as the district athletic director, and there's a certain amount of stipend or money that is going towards that. And as I understand it, we also have a half-time administrative person working on the district level athletic director to support that role. And so I guess the clarification that we need going forward is how much is already invested in that overall district level athletic director, and how much would have to be added in order to create that new role. And
sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, so you are correct. Jeremy is currently serving as lead athletic director, and he's currently a higher pay grade for the athletic directors of the 4 high schools. I don't have that number with me at the moment, but it is a classification higher than the other ADs to do district-wide activities. He's getting some limited support from one of the administrative assistants in the chief's office right now at Doyle. But if we were to add a district-wide AD based on established averages, I put in my more detailed analysis for the board that I'm estimating it would be approximately not only one administrative position, but an administrative assistant to help coordinate. And that would be approximately $225,000 to establish that office at the district level.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'd be interested in knowing if an actual full FTE is needed in order to support that district-wide position, or if that could be combined with some other administrative role at central office. So if we could look into that. And I guess just more analysis on how it has been working, sort of the pros of the way we've been doing it and the cons. I know there are a lot of other districts around us that have many fewer high schools that have a full-time dedicated district athletic director. And I know there's some other things that we've been really interested in doing in addition to the role, whether we're talking about, co-curriculars, whether we're talking about the access to participating in athletics through transportation or other barriers. And just knowing that, from our own reports 6 or 7 years ago, that students who participate in athletics do better academically. And whichever way the causal link goes on that, I think it's really something important for us to acknowledge, and just seeing how we can open up access to both athletics and other co-curriculars that help students do better in school. And then Laura, I'll just take one more sec to explain the other amendment. The other amendment that I submitted was for a executive director of multilingual services. And I would be interested in a further analysis from the administration about how that department is functionally working right now. In the budget, we can see that there's a split between the curriculum and instruction and the state and federal programs. And just my concern that having a department functioning in 2 silos isn't necessarily what's best for students and the staff working in those departments. So I would be very interested in another analysis by the administration, I guess, about how they see this working and how we see ourselves serving English language learners going forward in the most effective way.
I'll continue to work with our CNI team and our state and federal programs to provide more information on that.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Russ. Board Member Simpkin.
Thank you. I have 2 things I want to bring up. One is, as we're looking to identify funding sources for some of the amendments that require that, there was an amendment that I had put forth initially that's not part of this proposal that could provide some of the funding. And so I just want to put that out there and stay vague about it, but just put that out there. The second is, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the amendment that I entered in and add in. Russ, you did a nice synopsis of it, but I want to just talk a little bit about the detail behind what I was imagining for a bonus structure. And the idea behind it is that given the number of unfilled positions that we had this year, we know that creates incredible strain on the other people that are here in those positions. And so in order to help recognize that makes it more difficult for them, and to be able to provide some additional salary, that we create a bonus structure that staff can count on over the next year. And so the idea behind it would be that any unused money that is in the budget for salary that is not used in a particular quarter gets reallocated, or not reallocated, but gets allocated for bonuses for staff that are working. And I'm thinking about our permanent staff. I'm thinking about staff that are making under $75,000 a year that can then receive additional bonuses. And so, Ross, I saw that you're saying that because they're all in different categories, we can't lump it all together, but it feels like we probably could do individual bonus pots and then be able to figure out a way to reallocate that.
So I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, we wouldn't be able to put it in a separate pot per se, but if the question is about identification of savings as the year goes on to fund future bonus structures, we can certainly bring that back during the budget year for future discussion. I just wanted to caution that it's not possible to pool funds in that manner, especially because they're dissimilar fund sources. But if we need to identify vacancies by area and bring that back for further analysis, I can work with the HR team to make sure board members know what's going on there. And then if we want to act on future bonus structures, we can. I do want to put some caution on there, though, that anything we call a reliable bonus would be wholly dependent on our fill rate. So as soon as we get back to any type of normal capacity, that structure would not be sustainable.
Right. And to me, I think that actually that's a really nice balance, because if we're at full capacity for our staff, some of that pressure is relieved. And when we're not, the bonuses are coming their way. And so to me, it's a balance to be able to make sure that our staff who are working extraordinarily hard are being able to receive something extra throughout the year. I would love to have this be some sort of a system that isn't going to be a complete surprise to them, so that they know that it's coming, and that if there are unused funds, that they will be redistributed.
I guess my only response to that is that I'm not sure how it wouldn't be a surprise if it's a quarter look back, but we'll continue to flesh that out as time comes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Board Member Simpkin. Board Member Vandermeulen.
Yes, just my amendment that I put to cut the 7.8 at central office staff. I had taken that out of unfilled positions. Do I need an additional funding source, or can it go as is?
We're still currently looking at vacant positions and what would be potential for reductions. At this point, we're not bringing forward 7.8 positions for identification, but we have certainly been working with HR on which positions are potential at this point.
All right, and so if I were to, I could still request that it be entered correct.
We would need to collaborate on what those position eliminations would do in relation to work streams of the district, but we can continue that discussion.
Great, I'll set up a meeting with you. Thanks, Ross.
Thank you, Board Member Vandermeulen. Any more questions on the budget before we move on? Ross, do you have any other concluding comments or anything?
No, just that, I mean, as everyone has heard me say, this is definitely a very difficult period to be doing school district budgets. I've been doing this for over 16 years now, and this is one of the most challenging environments we've been in. And I don't say that lightly. I mean, you might hear me say it again, but I don't say that lightly, simply because it's become a very politically motivated situation where it used to be just about supporting kids. So I look forward to a time where we can return to some level of normalcy around how we fund education, and that we're not looking for two nickels to rub together just so that we can do what we really want to do.
Thank you so much, Ross. Really appreciate those comments. Board Member Castro, did you have another question?
Thank you. I just had one comment in terms of I fully support all of our efforts to really scrape together everything so that we can better compensate our staff for the work that they do. And I just want to say that I really appreciate Board Member Simpkin's idea in terms of trying to structure a pay bonus based off the fill rate and vacancies, especially because we do kind of get into this tricky situation where if we do permanently collapse a position or eliminate position, that position is gone forever. We can't get it back, even if we get a potential candidate to fill that position, and that those responsibilities have to fall on someone, and that creates just more additional strain for our staff. So as we go through and think about eliminating potential positions, we just really have to think hard and be comfortable with the fact that we would probably be eliminating that position forever.
Thank you, Board Member Castro. And I really appreciate that comment, because some of the positions that we have at central office, just because they're vacant, doesn't mean they're not essential to the function of the district. And so I agree with you completely that doing an analysis of that, and I know the district administration has worked on that this year as far as an analysis of which positions are necessary. Yeah, I just appreciate that comment. All right. Well, thank you very much, Ross. Again, really important moving forward to the June vote in a couple weeks, that if you have any other questions or other things come up, please contact Ross in advance with any questions, or Dr. Jenkins and Dr. McGregory. And I know they'll be interested in continuing to provide those answers. All right, thank you. The next agenda item, and this sort of relates to the budget discussion we have been having. I'd like to invite Dr. Stanford Taylor to join us to discuss the Project Village Builder update. And this was an update that Ross indicated in the slides he was talking about, that would be in addition to the June budget vote. And Dr. Stanford Taylor is here to give us an update on what that investment would be and what the programming is looking like. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Board Member Gomez-Smith. Good evening to everyone, and thank you for allowing me to take this opportunity to update you on our K-12 Village Builder proposal. I'm joined tonight by Adam Clausen, the Associate Superintendents and Deputy Associate Superintendents of Schools, and I invite them to chime in at any point. But before we start, I just want to stop and appreciate the conversation that you just had regarding ways to value and reward our staff. And I ask that you look at this proposal in a way of supporting them by providing human resources. So this is an additional way to look at supporting our staff who have worked so hard. I just want to give you a little bit of a recap to this proposal. We began this discussion in early February at the board's retreat. And since that time, we've solicited input from many different MMSD employee units, school-based employees, central office staff, building administrators, associate superintendents, and in briefings with some of the board members. We've also spoken with the Superintendent's Human Relations Advisory Council and Madtown Mamas Advisory or Advocacy Group. We've had great conversations. Overall, the feedback was very encouraging and supportive. We listened to and acted on the feedback that we received. And I know in a meeting with Board Member Simkin, she asked that we think about a way to reduce the proposal. Initially, we were talking about village builders in every school, 3 per school, which gave us a huge number to hire. And so there were many considerations for doing this. So I'm excited about this refined proposal that we're going to share with you. And it's very intentional and in support of MMSD's goals, core values, and also in alignment with our SIP or School Improvement Plan goals of culture and climate and family and community engagement. We're terming the entire proposal as village builders, even though there are specific positions in there that we're calling a village builder position, and that's at the elementary level. These positions are in direct service to students. And that was one of the things that we wanted to make sure we were not adding additional folks at the DPI central office level. These positions will be in the schools in support of our students. We're addressing the disruption in learning and social emotional wellness of our students caused by the pandemic by using a wraparound approach similar to our community schools model. And so in collaboration with the associate superintendents, we developed this more intentional approach for our schools designated as targeted support and improvement and additional targeted support and improvement. So we term those the TSI schools and the ATSI schools. The exception to this will be Muir and Schenck. And those are being looked at for a number of reasons, but including in that is their mobility and their poverty. Also recall that use of ESSER funds had to be in alignment with those guidelines around addressing learning loss, which I'm calling disruption in education, and extended school day or school year, so extended learning. So I asked if Jesse could pull up the chart. I'd like to kind of walk you through the elementary proposal. So we have taken those 14 schools that were ATSI and TSI and included Muir and Schenck in that for a total of 16 schools to look at building a package specifically around those schools and the needs of those schools. In this package, we have what we're calling a resource coordinator, village builders, and those were the positions that we've had lots of discussion around, and family liaisons. Remember, again, we're using a model similar to community schools. Now, 4 of these schools are already designated as community schools. Those 4 would be Hawthorne, Hawthorne, Mendota, Leopold, and Lakeview. So with the community schools model, they already have resource coordinators and they have family liaisons. So for Leopold, which is in your first category, we then are going to add an additional resource coordinator because you understand that Leopold is huge. Its population is much larger than our other elementary schools. And they will also get 2 village builders. The next category will receive a resource coordinator, village builder, and family liaison. And those are schools that are not community schools. The third category are village builders and family liaisons will be what those 4 schools, Emerson, Lincoln, Lowell, and Thoreau would receive. And then in the 4th column, those schools would just receive the village builders. And you note that the numbers are different and that's based on the school needs. So for Anana, they would have 2, Crestwood would also have 2 village builders, Gompers the same, Hawthorne would have 4, Mendota would have 4, and Lakeview would have 3. And for Muir and Schenck, we would add a family liaison. I'm going to pause for a moment and ask if the associates have any additional points that they would like to make.
Nope, you hit them all.
Okay, great. So in total, our proposal would add 9 family liaisons. Recall I said that 6 of the schools or 4 of the schools are community schools, but there are 6 who already have family liaisons. These positions would help to support our scholars and families in connecting them to needed resources. Additionally, 4 community schools resource coordinators, 33 village builders, and 9 student coaches would be hired. And I'm going to talk on the student coaches in just a moment. The village builder positions will be 20 hours per week. Now, when we spoke with a number of the elementary principals, and especially those who would be impacted by this proposal, one of their questions was around the 20 hours and what about the existing people who held positions that were very similar to that, and would they not rush to this position? So I think that's one of the things that might not cause that to happen. But all of these positions will be listed as 2 years with eligibility for benefits. We know that there are many benefits for students, families, schools, and the community with the community schools model. And many districts are intentionally using this model in response to the needs that were lifted during the pandemic. We're hoping to revitalize discussions with those partners that we were in partnership with before, who supported the community schools model, but wanted us to move at a faster pace. So we want to re-engage them in these discussions about expanding the middle schools or community schools. So with us putting in these resources that are very similar to the existing community schools, we're hoping they will see that as an effort for us moving towards more community schools. I'll pause there on that piece before I go to the middle and high school.
Thank you, Dr. Stanford Taylor. Before, Nikki, is it okay if I ask a quick clarifying question? Okay, I am wondering if you can explain for people who don't understand the lingo, what TSI and ATSI mean in relation to ESSA and how our schools got that designation and what it means for the extra support and attention that we need to pay to these schools.
Okay. And I actually am going to ask our elementary associate superintendent, Ms. Stanford, are you there, or
Yes.
Mr. Harvey, to articulate that?
Yes. So the TSI schools are the targeted support and improvement schools. And those are schools that have one or more student groups that are performing at the bottom 10% in the state. The ATSI schools, which are the additional targeted support and improvement schools, have one or more student groups that are performing at the bottom 5% of schools in the state.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
And these are federal designations? All right, then I'll move to our student coach portion, and this.
I'm sorry, we do have a couple of questions for you to start out. Board member Vandermeulen.
So from what I'm seeing, this is fully ESSER funded, or is it ESSER funded and our general fund 10 funded?
ESSER funded and.
See, my problem is with the and. I would love this program. I think it's a brilliant idea. I really do. Problem is, I hate saying this, but we lost 700 kids to summer school for no teachers. And I can't, because of that, as much as I want to. And yes, I think it's a game changer. I just don't know how I can reconcile the two. But I think the work is wonderful. I'm stuck in that mode. I'm sorry.
I hear what you're saying. And I guess I'm looking into the future in terms of the kids who will return to us and what their needs will be. They will continue to have those social, emotional wellness needs. They will continue to be at the space where they need a little more urging and a little more academic grounding. So if we want to get them on onto stable grounding, we have to create some means of support for them, and not just for them, for our teachers. I mean, most of your conversation earlier was about our educators and how much they have given and how much they have been stressed. These are additional human supports for our educators, for our students, for our families and our schools. So I appreciate what you say.
I respect that very much. My only last comment, if I may, is just that I respect our staff for doing that. It's just, I don't know how special ed did it for 10 years without an increase with so little people doing that. And I want to be able to figure out how to do that without using non-ESSER funds.
And I think
Thank you.
Ross is going to be able to explain the and portion of that.
I was just going to say the same thing. Ross, are you here to clarify for us?
Just to clarify, so in my slides, I'd indicated that the core village builder and student coaches portion of the proposal is on ESSER, but that the family liaison portion, in accordance with our community school model, is coming out of Fund 80. So none of this would be hitting the general fund.
That I could do.
So I think we're talking about 2.06 million in ESSER funding.
All right. Board member, is that your one question, Nikki, or?
That was it.
Okay, thank you so much. Board member Nichols.
Yes. First of all, let me just say that just on the elementary component, obviously this proposal speaks to my heart, being as though this is work that I was very close to when I worked at the
district. Foundation for this work. Yes,
So let me just say, I love the intentionality of taking the 14 schools that probably need the most extra tender loving care right now. So love that intentionality of like aligning the extra support around those 14 schools. Love the fact that you're looking for consistency in renaming the liaison positions from parent liaison to family liaison, because we had schools that were using both interchangeably. And I do think the family liaison title is more inclusive. And I like the way that you're thinking about kind of some of the differentiated levels of support based on which schools might need a family liaison, some village builders, and the community schools resource coordinators. My wondering is, when I see that there are some schools that are going to get a community school resource coordinator, but we have not officially, to my knowledge as a board, said that we were expanding community schools. Are you using the limited term funds that we have through ESSER to kind of set the conditions to hopefully get like the foundation laid in place for community schools, and then hoping that a near future conversation will come back around officially expanding? Is that what you're
absolutely thinking? That's absolutely where we're going.
Okay.
That's our hope.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Board member Castor, I saw your hand up and then down. Did you?
I'm just going to wait for the end of the presentation.
Okay. Board member Simkin.
A quick question for Ross. Ross, can you just tell me and everyone else who doesn't know, what is Fund 80?
Absolutely. So there's a number of fund classifications that we manage in our school district budget, one of which is called Fund 80, or the Community Services Fund. The primary focus of community services is, or should be pretty evident, is for the benefit of the entire community, not specifically to MMSD or its students. It's available for community programming outside the revenue limit.
Great. And how much is the budget line item for this program in that fund?
For this program?
Mm-hmm.
At this point, the expansion would be approximately $400,000.
Okay, thank you.
That's out of Fund 80.
All right, board member Castro.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And Dr. Sanford Taylor, thank you. Will the participants who take these roles, will they still have a pathway to get their teacher certification?
Happy you asked. I'm getting to that in just a moment.
Okay, I will wait. Thank you. Thank you.
Board member Nichols, do you have one more clarifying question?
Yes, thank you. This is just to clarify the total amount, which I know we haven't quite gotten to the next part. So I can hold off, but just to clarify, the total proposal, elementary and middle school, is the 2,600,000, is that right?
Ross, are you there?
Yep,
So
coming back.
Or maybe did I get the numbers
ESSER portion
transposed?
was 2 million and the Fund 80 portion was 400,000.
Exactly right.
Okay, and the ESSER funds that we're talking about are the combination of the Governor Evers coronavirus relief funds plus ESSER 2 and 3, or these
They
are
were
separate?
presented separately. So that's why I can recap that real quick. So in April, we had a number of programming requests from Carolyn's department that were to be identified for reestablishing areas of that department. And those are for programming, contractual services, et cetera. What Carolyn's outlining here is the staffing portion above and beyond that April request, which includes approximately $2 million on ESSER for the village builder and student coaches, and another $400,000 approximately for additional family liaisons and Fund 80.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Okay. So move to the second part. Are you ready?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. So under the student coaches, we're proposing 2 student coaches per high school, per comprehensive high schools. So that would be East, La Follette, West, and Memorial. These positions will work directly to support students at the transition points. That's one of the things we've been looking at and talking about is where do we lose our students when they're moving across those grade levels or at those transition points. So we're hoping that this will help to address that. Capital and Shabazz will share 1 student coach. And we're going to work with their administrators to create work streams that will be responsive to the unique nature of programming at both of those schools. And I see a concerned look on someone's face here. When we talk about the 2 at the comprehensive high schools, they're going to work with those feeder middle schools. Capital and Shabazz don't necessarily have feeder middle schools because their kids can come from anywhere. And so that's when I'm talking about the unique nature of those. We're not leaving them out of programming, but we'll have to work with them on unique ways to use their student coaches. For all of these positions, the recruitment will be done using and in collaboration with school staff. We're looking at traditional and non-traditional avenues for recruitment. We'll work with community and youth serving organizations such as the Urban League, Central Hispano, the Hmong Institute, NAACP, and through community events such as the one that we're having this coming weekend at Juneteenth, where we will have a booth available and we'll be talking about some of this. Again, we're going to involve the school personnel. When we met with principals, they were excited about these new positions and even thinking about people that they could use from their communities or they could invite to apply for these positions. The other part to this is that we've begun discussions regarding appropriate PD and orientation for each of these positions. And in the case of those positions that currently exist, like family liaisons and those, will work in close collaboration with those teams and those systems. So we know that community schools will be back in the elementary associates that will be back in their departments. And so instead of creating a separate work stream for PD, and that we will use the existing systems and work streams. And we're excited about conversations that we're having regarding the expansion of our Grow Your Own. So we've had a couple of conversations around that. We want to develop additional pathways for our folks who are in those entry-level positions. And I should say, especially for those folks who are in entry-level positions. We want to provide access to them that would increase the opportunity for upward mobility. We're hoping to tailor the program to have several entry points and exit points, because we recognize that there are lots of barriers that exist for many of our folks, and especially those in the entry-level positions who probably have more than one job to try to help with income for the family. And so we want to develop this in such a way that if that person were to enter, let's say if we're working with Madison College, that we could create a 2-year certificate or a 1-year certificate and a 2-year associates. But all of the work that we would do would lead them to a path to a terminal degree if that's what they chose. But we want an exit point for them to feel like they've accomplished something, even though they might have to stop out for a minute, that I've got a certificate in this thing, or I've got my associate's degree. And that's as much as I can do for right now. But if I want to go back to become a counselor or teacher, a social worker, that there is some avenue for me to be able to do that. And then the last piece is that we are having conversations with our Rocket folks, the research and innovation team, regarding the development of some metrics to demonstrate impact. So I've asked Jesse to include documentation in your board docs regarding the Village Builder proposal so that you'll be able to see more of those, a greater description of the jobs, the roles that we are envisioning for each of these positions. Now, any additional questions and comments?
Dr. Stanford Taylor, can I ask, were those positions already added to board docs so they're attached to the agenda for today, or is that something that we'll see coming?
You will see that coming, not for today.
Okay. Board Member Nichols.
Thank you. Okay, I'm looking at the written summary proposal of each of the positions that you described. So just to make sure I'm clear, you're saying that there will be 2 student coaches per high school, comprehensive high school.
Yes.
But I see a box in the document that also describes middle school.
So these folks will work across high school to middle school. That's the alignment.
Okay, so that's the transition piece that you were describing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So they're able to capture those students and nurture them across to high school.
Okay. So one of the things I think I'm wondering about, and you may not be able to answer it. So in all fairness, if it can't be answered tonight, it's okay. I am thinking about, I believe I saw in the ESSER plan that we were expanding the feeder pattern social workers, which are also working with families in a particular feeder pattern, right? To bring some continuity from a family who may have elementary, middle, and or high school age children, and really seeing the family as a whole unit. So I'm curious about the connections with the feeder pattern social worker. I'm curious about if we still have staffing left for 9th grade on track coordinators. Because and I don't know if those still exist, but at one point they did. There was FTE allocation for 9OT, which is what we call 9th grade on track, and just thinking about that. And then obviously you did reference the multicultural services coordinators, and the RJ coordinator, which was a newer investment this year. So that's a lot of people who could be well leveraged to help support our middle and high school students. I'm just wondering, and again, if you can't answer tonight, it's fine. I am curious about how to bring community, bring those positions together to bring community so that there is more shared visibility on the students that they're supporting, so that you're talking across schools, and elevating the lessons learned around what it means to have a number of support staff really working to have, greater impact on student support. So that's where I'm going with all of the pieces that may be in play. But that's not I want to be clear, I'm in support of adding these additional roles. Thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate your points. Those were some of the things that I discovered too. One was my question around on-track indicators, early warning system. Where are we with those and who's working with those? So one of the ways we envisioned this position operating was with our multicultural services coordinators. And in conversations with them around what were the things that in this past couple of years you would like to have been able to do, but you weren't able to do? If you could restructure your position, what are some of the things you would put more of an emphasis on? And then when we started to talk about these transitions, then we thought, well, how can we leverage the support of our multicultural services coordinators with the student coach? They go over, but the amount of time that they spend in a middle school is very minimal. We want a presence in those schools. And so the way we've defined it is they will work a number of half days in those middle schools and return back. So you're creating that relationship. So where kids really know you, you really know them, you can really get them prepared for what it means to go to high school. We're trying to eliminate this 9th grade bottoming out of our students. And I think you can only do that through developing those relationships, knowing who those kids are and getting them acclimated to what to expect and being ready for that.
Great. Thank you for your thinking intentionally about, how to get folks more familiar with students and also thinking about how they're going to coordinate and leverage each other. Chair Gomez-Schmidt, I just have a quick follow-up.
Okay.
Which is, I'm making an assumption, and perhaps I should not, but I'm making an assumption that the kind of folks that we would like to attract into all of these roles, from elementary through high school, are folks who are going to represent our student body in terms of diversity, who are going to be able to connect with our scholars. And what I'll say this, but I know that you've been thinking about this.
Mm-hmm.
If we are successful in hiring folks that can come into our schools and build these relationships with our students and connect with them and become trusting adults to help them navigate, wonderful. If those folks are Black and brown community members that come into our schools and they only end up being tapped for behavior or the behaviors that folks,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just a little concerned that the imagining that you have and the intentionality that you have will not come to fruition. Because I know personally from working in MMSD that oftentimes our MSCs
Mm-hmm.
are called to the classroom
Yes.
because they're seen as one of the few who
Mm-hmm.
can de-escalate, relate, you know what I mean? And so there's a beauty in that. But yeah, I'll just say that I'm hoping that as you bring folks in,
Mm-hmm.
we are thinking intentionally about how to really leverage their skill set and not just have them be the folks called upon when things are in a crisis.
I appreciate you lifting that up. And truly, that was one of the concerns in our conversations with folks. So for our MSCs, we're creating a tracker and we're communicating this to the administrators so that they understand where the priority for those roles are. At the elementary school, we've already had a conversation or a couple of conversations with those principals. And that was one of the things that we lifted up, is that this was not to be a behavior position for the village builders. And there was some pushback on that in terms of other people who have to do those kinds of things. But if we want to have those people operate the way we envision them operating, and creating and sustaining those relationships and helping students to process through so that they are in the learning environment and not excluded from the learning environment. They cannot be doing the discipline stuff. And so we've made that very clear on that end. And then the one other thing I wanted to add to your question around supports for transitions is that in creating the engagement department, we will have staff and students, or student and staff supports within that department. And so it will be easier to coordinate what all of our folks who are working across transition points are doing.
Right, thank you, Board Member Nichols. Board Member Castro.
Thank you so much, Board Member Nichols and Dr. Sanford Taylor. Board Member Nichols, I know that you were deeply involved in this work and your other roles here in MMSD in the past, and it's a big reason why I find this proposal to be so inspiring and brilliant for a lot of reasons. One that you just mentioned, Board Member Nichols and Dr. Sanford Taylor, that we are bringing in folks as educators, and that we know, and I think this proposal knows at its heart that we have so many organic educators in our community that have been gatekept from formal education settings or licensure in the past for whatever reason, but well, for a lot of reasons that we know, but nevertheless love our children and know how to connect with them, and that we are bringing in folks already building villages in the community to do that work in the school and provide a pathway for them to become teachers or counselors or social workers in the future, I think breaks a lot of barriers and is radical. Dr. Sanford Taylor, you said that this was in line with our strategic framework. It's especially in line with goal number 3, African American children and youth will excel in our schools. To Board Member Nichols' point, in 2019, when the most recent data I have available, 57.8% of our students were of color in the district compared to 13.6% of its teachers. So I think that the fact that we are recruiting and bringing in new potential teachers, I think is a solution to diversifying our workforce. I think it's a solution to the so-called teacher shortage. And it ultimately supports the academics. Students that have, especially at the elementary level, students that have a Black teacher were more likely to graduate from high school and enroll in college. Those who had 2 were even more likely. So I see a lot of promise in this proposal in the short term and long term. And I guess my immediate questions are, how are we working with HR to really leverage the best recruiting strategies? And it's something that we need to be talking about, that Board Member Nichols mentioned, that a lot of our Black and brown staff are pigeonholed into quote unquote behavioral issues. And how are we going to address that, whether it be through professional development or accountability with some of our school level administrators?
And certainly we have begun those talks regarding professional development. So Jen Shepke, who's working with the Grow Your Own, been in conversation around that with Jorge and Nichelle around providing professional development and what that might look like and how often we might have to do that. So I'm encouraged. And let me just say, Board Member Nichols, all of this is built on the foundation that you left. So we so appreciate everything you've done.
I appreciate that. You're taking it to the next level. So you don't need to reference me anymore, but I appreciate it.
Thank you, Board Member Castro. Board Member Muldrow, or President Muldrow.
Thank you so much, Chair Gomez-Schmidt. I want to ask, what is the total number of positions we're looking to fill between the elementary and secondary program?
55.
So we're looking at bringing in 55 additional people to support our students in our schools. I want to first thank you for that. I think this is really what members of this board have been advocating for in terms of making sure we're using ESSER dollars to get people in our schools, working with our educators, supporting our students. So thank you for prioritizing this kind of support to our students that will be about, delivering direct services. 55 positions is a lot of positions. We have struggled to hire folks for summer school. We're struggling to have the conversation about what a living wage is going to look like for people working for this district. How do we plan to fill 55 positions before September? And what do we do if that becomes a problem?
Thank you. I understand that. And we do realize that's a challenge. And let me tell you how those positions are broken up. 4 of those are the resource coordinators. 9 of them are the family liaisons. 33 are village builders. And then the other 9 are student coaches. And so we do have differentiated levels of salary or wages for those positions. But in all of those, we are looking at the grow your own portion as being an attraction, the benefits as being an attraction. And we're looking at working with our organic scholars, the folks who are out there in our communities, who know our communities, who are advocating for our schools to assist us in recruiting for these positions. I know it won't be easy. I think by reducing the number of village builders from what we had before, which was close to 100, it makes it a little bit more doable.
I think, reducing it makes sense. I still think that 55 people before September is an ambitious goal. I'm wondering, when is the window opening for hiring these positions? So if you're out there right now and you're thinking, this is the job for me, when can you apply? And how long is that window open?
I'm waiting for you all to say yes, and then I start. But we are this weekend going to be kind of promoting, be on the lookout for these kinds of things that might be coming your way. But as soon as you give me the go, we get started.
Well, that's excellent to hear that material is prepped and folks are ready to begin that hiring process. I think my larger scale question is, what are the results that we hope that this programming promotes for young people? And how are we incorporating lessons learned this year in terms of the ways our young people express their need for additional support, and the ways that our teachers expressed, requests for additional support? I guess my biggest fear is that as I went around our district this year, I saw our instructional coaches, I saw our all kinds of folks from central office working as substitute teachers. And what are we going to do to prevent these folks from just kind of filling holes that are created by our staffing shortage? So if you can speak to what are the results we want this position to promote, and how are we going to prevent this position from being used as kind of a catch-all or a substitute teaching position if we're struggling to recruit and retain our staff at this point?
I hear everything you're saying. I'm hopeful that it will get better, but in terms of looking at where we currently are and how our families continue to struggle, and with everything that's happening to our economy right now, we can predict that struggle will continue for a while. I think once we get past our negotiations and this COVID pandemic and the different strands that have been showing up give some relief, we will get there. I also understand that our educators and everyone involved in our educational enterprise has had their reserves depleted. And working from that stance, we have to move forward with thinking about, and that's why I love this proposal, and that we're sending in support, additional supports for our educators to relieve some of the pressure that currently exists. How we get there, I'm optimistic again about finding folks who have witnessed and want to get in and do the good work, to come back and say, hey, I'm willing. I would love to have a job working with our next generation, working with our future. And so I think a lot of it is on us, but I cannot predict what next year might look like, especially given what we're living in right now. Will there be folks called out to sub in places? Probably. Can we protect our new staff? I would hope so. But I can't promise that. What we're working towards is to get our students re-engaged in this thing that we call schooling, which we're hoping to move to a different level, so that their experiences are one of belonging, one of belief that what's in them can move them to the next level. They have all they need. They're equipped with what they need. And to address the social and emotional needs caused in part by the pandemic. We can't put it all on the pandemic. Those needs existed before. And so we have to do a better job of being very intentional about how those supports work for our students and our families, because if our families aren't well, our students aren't going to do well either. So we can't divorce our students from our families and our communities.
Dr. Carolyn Stanford, I greatly appreciate you speaking to kind of what it means to meet the needs of the entire student and family and community, in order for young people to be successful in our schools. I think I am missing a little bit of what you're saying our core kind of goals are and what we hope this programming will do in terms of promoting student achievement at school. And I think, I greatly appreciate you speaking to the reality of the pandemic. But my real last question is, how are we going to safeguard these positions so that we know that they are providing support to students, families, communities effectively to meet our goals, and not getting sucked into the other labor associated with the pandemic?
So we are communicating that to building administrators, but we are also developing a tracker for all of our new positions to use. And we're going to share that with the administrators and others so that they know exactly what these positions are supposed to be working towards. And that the majority of their time should be spent on those things. And I know most of the job descriptions we have out there say that these are the things, but I think at some point we have to get to a percentage. Maybe it's 80% or 90% will be devoted to these things. The other 10% is whatever that culture and climate dictates. This is Carolyn Stanford Taylor talking. But we do have a tracker developed that we have shown to our MSCs and other people in the schools working in those positions to see, what does this look like and feel like to you? Does this enable you to do the work that would be required of your position? And we're getting some additional input regarding that. But in the end, we want to see our kids successful. We want to remove those barriers to their success. And what are those? If they come to school that morning and they're just not in a position to engage in whatever the academic activity is that morning, we've got a warm, nurturing person there that's going to take them and help them process those emotions and feelings and get them into a space that they're able to receive what's happening in the classroom with their classmates.
Thank you so much. President Muldrow, does that answer your questions?
Yes, I think what I'm seeing as the goal or the long-term impact we're hoping that this has is that young people have the social emotional support that they need to be successful academically. And so I think really thinking through how we gauge that, and I appreciate you speaking to the tracker, but I do hope that we see our communities within our schools strengthened, our culture and our climate strengthened. And I do hope that we're looking to the ways in which we measure culture and climate, as well as academic success, to say whether or not this pilot made sense for our schools and really promoted, academic success among our learners.
Yes. Especially if we're hoping to use this model to engage our partners.
Board Member Simpkin, I see your hand. I'm just wondering if it would be okay with you if I do a quick follow-up question. Okay. Ms. Stanford Taylor, one of the questions that I have, and it relates to what President Muldrow was saying, would a goal around this be because it is two schools that are, this additional targeted support and the targeted support through the federal designation, is one of the goals to move these schools off of that designation. I'm sort of curious what you think about that.
Absolutely. And that was one of the reasoning for targeting in on that set of schools or those schools.
Okay. Board Member Simpkin.
So I wanted to jump in first just to say I am extraordinarily excited about this program. I think that the potential here is, this could be a game changer if we can grow it. It feels like a starting place, feels like it can have some impact. And it hits all those pieces that we know are what our students need. Our students need somebody that they can turn to, that they can trust, that's going to be available, that they can relate to, that is going to be there for them. And our schools are stretched so tight right now around being able to provide that. I think I'm just going to urge you, I think similarly to what Board President Muldrow was saying and Chair Gomez-Schmidt was saying, to really clarify your goals and how you're going to collect data around this. I would love to see this be something that grows. And in order for it to grow, we're going to have to get some really good data.
Yes, and that's what we're working with our research and innovation people around.
It is fantastic.
We want to see that too. We want to see a positive impact.
Thank you so much for all your work on this so far.
Thank you.
Board Member Nichols.
All right, one last thing. Related, this is going back to President Muldrow's question around the filling all of the 55 positions. This is a busy season for hiring, right? We're on all, I'm sure HR is on all cylinders, firing, so to speak, in terms of interviewing and getting people through the process. I am curious if you have had any conversations with HR about ways to perhaps expedite a process for the different roles, and maybe folks that are coming in through the family liaison are maybe different than the village builder process, and maybe there might be some innovative ways to do some interviewing that might get folks through the process sooner. Again, I don't know if that's yours to answer, but I just wanted to put that out there because I know sometimes, the process to get people through from interview all the way to accepted offer, sometimes can be quite lengthy. So just hoping that you have an opportunity to look at which roles maybe you can maybe take a more innovative approach on the front end.
And we've done some thinking around that, especially when we were looking at our village builders, because that was the larger number of positions. And our thinking was to empower the schools, those elementary schools who may know of people who have supported their community and encourage those folks who come in to volunteer time, who might want to take those positions, being 20 hours. And we get strong encouragement from our elementary principals that they're really interested, and even thinking about who those people might be and what they might look like and all of those things. And so if we can disperse it, if we can come up with a process that disperses some of that ownership throughout the elementary schools, then it makes the lift much easier.
Thank you for that. That makes sense. That makes sense. And I will just follow up, Chair Gomez-Schmidt, by saying, I trust that you all will, thoughtfully come up with a set of outcomes for these roles as you're working with the research and evaluation or innovation team. One thing that I caution is that you move outcomes, or you develop outcomes that become not within the sphere of control or influence, meaning it feels like these roles, are really around relationship building, around the social emotional supports. So I'm hoping outcomes are there. And then as you move into the high school transition work, maybe you're finding a set of outcomes or indicators that are not so much about students attaining all their credits per se, but really how they've navigated the transition and maybe have had, higher attendance, or, are joining clubs, are finding themselves in school. So I know that you all will take care of that, but I think sometimes when we start talking about roles like this, too often we want to put like hard data that's like academic, moving the needle data on these kind of roles. And oftentimes you're just not going to see that same connection because it is very relational in nature. So finding the right set of metrics to measure that will be important.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Nichols. Board Member Castro.
Thank you so much. And just to piggyback off that, when we're thinking about data and goals, just encouraging all of us to expand our conception of what data is, particularly around qualitative data. So thinking of thoughtful ways to gauge the quality of life experience and how these new roles have impacted students' quality of life in the school and maybe even outside the school too. So maybe some of the potential benefits of this will show up in data, not even within the school district. It might show up in labor, employment, criminal justice data as well. And I think really focusing on the story aspect and how these roles have impacted the biography, the narrative of these students' lives could be really powerful and impactful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Castro. Ms. Stanford Taylor, I just have a few questions and I'll try to make this quick. My question is how these, going back to the village builders, how these members are going to be incorporated into grade level teams. Are they all going to work? I mean, have you picked a grade level that they're going to work at, or does it depend on the school they're going into and which grade level teams are ready to support this type of additional support? And how does it work with the other support staff that we have in the elementary schools already? So our SCAs, our cross-categorical teachers, our bilingual resource teachers, and everybody who's in there supporting. How do you see them sort of integrating into that, knowing they're only going to be there for half time? when they're there.
So I think those conversations start with the administrators. Initially, when we looked at these positions as village builders, we started out with one person per grade level. And you can see from the tailored design that we do not have that anymore. So what will have to happen is looking at the combination of resources within those buildings. How do they complement each other? We know the defined role that we want this position to play. So is it that they at the beginning of the day are meeting as a group? For instance, we have something in the high school that we call a soft landing, kind of check in. And we've done that through some other processes too. I think positive behavior supports and all of that. Just kind of do a check in. How's it going today? How are you feeling? Blah, blah, blah. It could look very different at different schools because of the way that we've designed this. And so in order for us to get at the goal of making sure that students are engaged, it might be that in Alice, that person is also working with the family liaison and they're tag teaming this. And so more of that is to be developed through working with the principals.
Okay, and that makes sense because you want it to be functional for each school that is getting this extra support. I completely get that piece. I am wondering if this is sort of building on the community schools model, which I have really appreciated at the schools that have done that. I myself, as a board member, joined, I think, after the last time we got a report on community schools. I mean, we're, obviously the last 2 years we've been operating in a pandemic. And so it's been hard, to bring all of the things that we need updating on back to the board. But has there been a report, or when was the last report on the effective community schools and what we've accomplished thus far and sort of what we're building on if we want to move forward with that model?
We had that conversation too, and Ms. Stanford looked it up. There was a report. I'm going to ask her to speak to that because that's the same thing we were asking. And since the community schools are moving back to their suite, she could speak to that.
Great, thank you.
So yeah, there has been some work done and some data collected with community schools. There was actually something done with MEP. And the community schools model this summer. And so they did put out a report on that in the effectiveness of working with community school resource coordinators in our community schools. And so we are working on revitalizing, enhancing, and restructuring some of the things that we know our community schools need in order to have the impact that we want them to have.
Okay, that's great. Would you be able to share that in a weekly update so we can sort of get up to speed on that?
Are you looking for the MEP report that was done during the summer or just community schools in general? Okay. No,
that would be great. Thank you so much. And then sort of my last comment, I'm very excited about this model about bringing more resources to the schools. And we talked, you explained the ATSI and the TSI schools, the additional targeted support and the targeted support schools, and really connecting this. One of the concerns I have is that this is a 2-year funded program. And so right now under ESSER. And so one of my concerns is the number of positions that we're bringing in for 2 years and making sure everybody understands that right now, this is literally one of our surge strategies. And we only have the funding under ESSER for 2 years of this program. And so I guess as we're thinking about goals and metrics and outcomes, I'd really like us to think about some of the short-term things we can measure, because a lot of this is hard to measure the impact in the short term. And we're going to have to figure out, once we get a year in or 2 years in, the effectiveness of this. Because even though the funding right now is short term, if we are going to be looking to continue this in some way, and I don't see how that's possible right now. I mean, again, it's funded on ESSER and it's a 2-year model. I want to make sure that we have some of those both short-term and long-term goals that we can try to measure as we move forward. But just being realistic that it is right now short-term funded.
Yes, and we're making certain that we lift that up so that people know these are 2-year terms. but we'll start to develop some baseline data to begin with, so that when we move, we can see if there's improvement, then how do we parse it out? Could it be attributable to this? Or, yeah, we'll figure that part out.
Okay, thanks for, making sure you get that added and that conversation happens up front. And thank you for bringing this information to the board. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the effort to give the extra resources to these schools. And I look forward to seeing more detail about how this could come together. So if there's more detail you can give us in the next couple of weeks about how some of this function is going to work, I think that would be really helpful as we make the decision on this. Board Member Nichols.
I'll make this very short and sweet since I know we have one more agenda topic. I do want to state that there was a lot of work in the last couple of years when Black Excellence started to partner with community-based organizations, some through grant making or grants that were kind of funded through the district, but also just in holding space for parents raising African-American Black children in our district and community partners who were doing a lot of work in our district. So this is just an encouragement, as I'm sure you will, Dr. Stanford Taylor, to go back to the well, because there are a lot of parents and community members who have already invested time and energy, who would probably be a great resource in thinking about folks who can help fill these positions and also help think through what impact and success in the short term might look like.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
And I would also be interested in board members' ideas around what outcome data might you suggest for us to look at.
Thank you very much for that offer, for our feedback on that. And I don't know, I feel like I'll need to give that a little bit more thought, but I really appreciate the opportunity to give some more feedback and input on that.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you so much for coming to the board and giving us a more detailed explanation of the ideas and potential behind this program. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm happy we didn't get rained out.
Yeah. Me too. Glad we're all together on Zoom. Thank you so much. All right, everybody, I would like to take a quick 5-minute recess. We are at 7:35 right now. We will come back at 7:40, and then we are doing our last agenda item, which is a human resources update. And thank you to all the rest of the staff, in addition to Carolyn Stanford Taylor, who were with us today for that update on the Village Builders. Really appreciate you being here. All right, it is 7:40. I'm hoping everyone is back so we can continue on with our last agenda item. All right. And Miss Carradine, I believe you are here to, oh, there you are. I see you on my screen. You are here to give us an update on human resources recruitment.
I am. Good
Great,
evening.
thank you.
All right, good evening and thank you for allowing us to present this recruitment plan to you. I've brought some extraordinary people with me tonight. I'll really quickly introduce them and then I'll let them get started. So I have Lisa Mortensen, who is the Director of Employee Relations. I have Carrie Ferguson, who is an analyst. I have Elaine Warbinski, who is also an analyst, and I have Luke Anderson, who is an employee specialist, and they will be presenting for you this evening. All right, Lisa, take it away.
Okay. I see a cat in the video there. That's very cute. All right, great. Well, good evening, Board President Muldrow, members of the board, Dr. McGregory, colleagues. My name is Lisa Mortensen. I'm the Director of Employee Relations. I've been with the district now for almost 5 months. I'm really happy to be here with you all tonight. I am also joined tonight by several of our human resources team members, Elaine, Carrie, and Luke. They will be presenting tonight as well. But before we begin, I do want to take this opportunity, before we look at the recruitment plan for the district, we do want to thank you all for your forward thinking regarding students and staff during the pandemic. This forward thinking, including approving the bonuses for staff, the COVID leave, the COVID hardship leave, and the mental health days. This critical decision-making helped the district and the human resources team as well, and during a really difficult time of the pandemic. To give you a summary of what we're going to be talking about, we do have a PowerPoint that we will be presenting in a few moments, highlighting our summer recruitment goal for the 22-23 school year is to be fully staffed by the beginning of the school year. We are placing priority on instructional and building level support positions. We sent out 2,400 contracts and have received 1,000 back to date, with 295 in the contract mailbox. We anticipate getting 2,300 contracts back for the upcoming school year. Last year, we got all the contracts back except for 22. This is coupled with the 21-22, 143 retirees. With that in mind, we are setting district recruitment goals to hire 100 substitute teachers and 143 teachers for a minimum total of 243 teachers. As stated in the Human Resources Weekly Updates, we are continuing to create dashboards and reporting systems to show the applicant composition trends for all positions, which includes differentiating new hires, rehires, and retirees by race, ethnicity, and gender makeup. At this time, I'd like to present the PowerPoint presentation. Jesse, if you could please bring that up on the screen. Okay, with that, I would like to introduce our HR analyst, Elaine, to speak on this recruitment strategy.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Tracy, and thank you everyone for your attention. Obviously, as you can see, we're moving our focus as it's been continuously, but definitely now this summer school has been finalized. We're now moving our recruitment forward with continuing to connect with colleges and universities to build those relationships, to also reach out to our candidates and walking them through the process from application through the entire hiring process. We are setting up virtual and in-person meetings with both our potential candidates as well as our college contacts at targeted schools to showcase MMSD and why we want their students to consider us as their employer. As stated in our weekly status reports, we're continuing to work with our student teachers to actively keep them on track, to recruit, and to obviously retain. And finally, as we look at our retirement forecast in our Madison and our HR report, we're looking at our turnover and working on succession planning and recruitment in these, in all position, all employee groups. And you can see some of the groups that we're working on establishing that.
Next video.
Yep, next slide. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I know some of this has already been presented at previous meetings for our recruitment and advertising strategies, but in a nutshell, we have really tried to make great partnerships and actually go up the supply chain, if you would, instead of sort of practices as usual, which has worked in the past. These are unprecedented times, as you've mentioned. So making these not only earlier partnerships, so working with those universities, but also getting to those student teachers before they graduate, getting to people as they graduate really early. We did job fairs in August, getting ready for people to be looking already for those jobs. So essentially jumping the line to sort of get in there before other districts were really even considering that recruiting. So then we even went to job fairs at high schools, right, get them young. So that was actually a really fun part of our recruitment strategy, was to talk to the young kiddos and to, see if we can guide them up and, sort of picture where they'll be, so to speak. And also make partnerships, not only at colleges and universities, but within the community, especially targeting candidates of color and bilingual, which we, of course, is a huge priority of trying to bring those folks in during shortages in every single department humanly possible. As far as advertising, we have slightly altered what we've been doing to try to really broaden. We have a very skilled analyst, DJ Portillo, who's not on the call today, but she has been extremely adept at linking our candidate tracking system to LinkedIn, Indeed. We unfortunately can't link it to WeCan, but we have already made accounts and we'll start posting our positions there just to broaden where we have. We went to WIS jobs, local radio stations, all the things that we can think of, plus making these partnerships with communities, community centers, and so we can try to really get the word out. I also want to stress that it has always been in the back of our mind is to make MMSD an employer of choice so that we can get sort of this employer branding out there that we are a great employer, come work for us. And whether that's word of mouth or a heck of a lot more advertising than we've done, that is a priority, something that we are always keeping in our minds as we move forward. Next slide.
This slide, I think, really shows some of the materials that we are displaying, the shorter flyer type information with the QR code that allows applicants to really get right into our system and start to that application process. As you can also see from the other side, our advertising strategy, as it's always been the case, we are an employer that really recruits from within. Our number one place that people hear about us is through us. Our current staff, our current employees are great recruiters, and I continue to admire that. And I think that's probably says a lot about us as an employer, that our own staff want others to join us and are out there advocating for us. And so if you'd like to go to the next slide, that would be great.
So this slide is an example of current metrics and data that we're using. We're really amping this up this year under Tracy Carradine's guidance to really use this to the biggest potential that we can. We have a great applicant tracking system. It has the ability to create incredible amounts of reports. to look at diversity data, to look at demographics. We need to look at all steps in our process. You can see on the bottom, we're tracking sort of how people are going through our process. We are thrilled to be able to put onboarding through this system so that we can all use one system to track and to guide applicants through our hiring process. I know it was mentioned earlier, this can sometimes be a lengthy process. We agree. This should absolutely mitigate some of those problems. It also allows hiring authorities to see where people are within this process. And this is going to be extremely great, especially for our principals that are just sometimes not totally aware where we are in that process. So we're thrilled about that. And also we have really pulled in a great deal of partnerships within HR to get all this work done. I especially want to call out Luke, who's on the call, who does an incredible amount of work behind the scenes to pull candidates in, especially since we did early hiring, early hire offers. That means licensing. And that means we have a huge hurdle, not only to get people in the door, but to get them to understand licensing, get those applications out. And Luke, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, thanks so much, Carrie. So basically, for a teacher, there's 3 types of license they can get. A lot of folks, as they're taking on positions they're not licensed in or educated in, a lot of folks are opting in for the 1 year with stipulations. Previously called the emergency license by DPI. So we've seen a lot of those coming in and just working with those folks to see what education they require, whether it's an approved educator prep program with a university, or if they can acquire that, meet that DPI requirement for licensure through a content test. We also see the 3-year provisional license, which I think is typically that's more what you're going to be inclined to see. And then the lifetime license is one that is technically it's a lifetime license, but teachers would need to provide a background check to DPI every 5 years. But so basically what my role in that process is just looking at each applicant or each, once an offer goes out, look at any licensing they already have, and then connecting them with the resources they need if they need to apply for an educator prep program or see what other pathways they might have. So it's usually pretty straightforward, but we do sometimes see a few extra hoops. Say it's someone who holds an out-of-state license. The process is just a bit different for them. So that's sort of where I come in to explain what steps they would need to follow from there.
Luke, can you speak a little bit about the onboarding process as well?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So my role there is just to check in on our new hires, make sure that they've provided everything they need and follow those steps. So there's the background check through the Department of Justice. There's the W-4 and I-9 forms that the I-9s we receive electronically. Currently, we're receiving W-4s paper versions, but I also follow up with those folks to make sure that they're submitting those materials in a timely manner so we can get them in their position and in schools or in whatever building they'll be working in.
Thank you.
I also want to add that Luke's help and expertise, along with our other 2 specialists that aren't on the call, have significantly helped our applicant process and onboarding and shorten the time. It's been an incredible help to move people through this process quickly, where we didn't have to pause and go through all that stuff ourselves as the analyst team. So it's been a great partnership. Thanks, Luke. Next slide.
Thanks, Carrie. And I will just really quick say, I joined the team around the same time as Lisa. So I'm not an expert quite yet. So I have also really appreciated the help of my colleagues, Tara and Francesca.
Absolutely.
All right, so this last slide, just finishing up, looking at our gender ratio data. Like I mentioned previously, we really are really digging into data to try to track our hiring practices, to look at equity, inclusion, fairness, and ability to get to our systems and get through the process using all the resources that you have. So you can see from these numbers, we have a lot of work to do. We have some tools within our applicant management system also where we can tag early on in our hiring processes candidates of color, so we can follow up with that later. And we are, of course, are just adhering to the goals of the district, which is to increase our diversity hiring candidates of color. And we are tracking these daily with our Cornerstone applicant tracking system, talent portal rather. And I think that's us. Is that it? Is there one more?
No, that's the last slide.
Perfect.
All right. Thank you for that.
Great, thank you. Thank you again for the opportunity for us to give this update. We really are digging into data, as Gary has mentioned, and we will be providing a more in-depth report this fall. And at this time, were there any questions for us?
Thank you so much for the presentation. I really appreciate this. I know there's been a lot of questions about how your process is working and if you have enough resources to do the job that you need to do to bring people into the district. So I think this is a topic that many board members are very interested in. One quick question before we start. With all the data that you presented us, is that what's the time frame of that data? I saw on the hired per unit, there was a time frame on that, like March to April. Is that March to April for all those data that you presented, or what is the time frame? Is that the whole year?
Yes, that's March until April, because what we were doing is we were taking snapshots to try and figure out, because a lot of these are prototypes that we are working on, and they did show up in our weekly updates as to how we were progressing in using Cornerstone and also building those, because everything that you saw here as far as data, we had to build within Cornerstone. So those were our prototypes.
Okay, and when did you start using Cornerstone again? I'm sorry, you probably said that and I missed it.
No problem. So what we did was we had SearchSoft and Cornerstone. So December 6th, we cut off SearchSoft and went strictly to Cornerstone. So from December 6th, 2021 until currently.
Okay, thank you so much. Board member Vandermeulen.
Yes. Yes. Just one quick question. Do we ask if, and it's not mandatory, of course, do we track, but do we disaggregate the data on disability at all?
I think that's one of the things that we will be looking at as we build these databases. Absolutely. We will try and take that into consideration. So as we build the databases, that is one of the things that we will be looking at.
Thank you.
Great question.
Board member Simpkin.
Thank you. I have 3 questions right now. The first is, I would like to hear more about what you're doing around high schoolers and talking to them at job fairs.
So I will let Carrie talk about that. But first of all, what we did was we have been looking at getting into the high schools to do recruitment fairs for the mere fact that they have a CNA program. And so we're looking at possibly hiring them for nursing assistants, as well as looking at hiring them for EAs, SEAs, and also getting them interested in education in those factors. So we did look at that as well. Carrie talked about DJ Portillo, who is bilingual, so she went as well. And so she caught the attention of quite a few bilingual students as well to get them interested in education. Carrie, you want to speak to that a little bit since you were there?
Of course, yeah. It was honestly incredibly well attended. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but there were many people there from all across almost everything. I mean, the Department of Agriculture was there. So a lot of people trying to get in early. What I find interesting coming from my standpoint is how many times I see resumes with our high schools on there. So I know that people are interested. I know that we're on their radar, but I think what's important to do is to really get in and speak to them so that they know it. And so going in there, at the high schools and sitting with DJ, who absolutely worked her Spanish that day. There were incredible quantities of bilingual kiddos interested. Was to sort of gauge how they're interested, right? So we have positions that are food service or custodial that they could, hop into without a college degree, but also getting the word out of how important that college degree is and come back and see us after. So I think it was connecting on multiple levels, and just getting us out there again to be that employer of choice. We're out there, we're ready for you, and to sort of funnel people back to our hands later.
And the other piece too is maybe as a part-time job, just to get their foot in the door, just to get started. So we were looking at that as well, if they could work like nights, weekends, or something to that nature. But we wanted to get them in the door and interested in MMSD as a part-time at the very least.
As a follow-up for that, for those students that are interested in pursuing teaching degrees immediately, are you collecting names? Do you have any like touch points in which you're checking back with them? Is that something you're thinking about doing?
Are you talking about high school students or?
I am high school students that are on their way to college.
Yes. So we are looking to, and we are working with, as Ms. Stanford Taylor said, we're also working with Jen Shepke on the Grow Your Own and getting that interest in, and absolutely getting those names, getting in touch with them. Because what we would like to do, and maybe we do that through the village builders and those types of positions, is either have them come back, or if they're going to stick around the Madison area, have them work part-time if need be. Like I said, get them in the door, get their names. And what we do now is we do that with applicants too. So applicants that may not have gotten the job that they applied for, we still keep their names and we still send them jobs, potential job openings, just to keep them, say, hey, you might not have got this job, but here's some other jobs that you may be interested in per your resume, per the information that we got from you. So absolutely, we are keeping in touch with any of the applicants, and also with the students that we're meeting and talking to about jobs in Madison.
Fantastic. My second question is related to the different types of licenses that teachers are coming in with. And Luke, I can't remember, you said emergency licenses are now called something else.
Yeah, the 1 year with stipulations.
1 year with stipulation, and then you said temporary 3 year?
Then is the provisional 3 year.
Provisional, okay. So what I'm interested in knowing is, for those two categories, do we have a way to track the change over time with the people that we're hiring? So are we seeing many more teachers that are coming into the district without those permanent licenses?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Like I mentioned, we have seen more of those 1 year with STIPs, with folks that are switching positions or teaching content areas that they're not, that they didn't go to school for. But again, I don't have the previous year's knowledge to really compare. But just from what I've gathered in my 5 or 6 months, definitely there have been more 1 year with stipulations, with folks just sort of shifting to meet school needs.
I think it would be really helpful for the board to get some data around that change over time. Because I think that probably is going to be connected to different needs for professional development as well, as just being aware of what our teachers are coming in with.
Yeah, I'd be happy to find that for you. Thank you.
That'll be great. And then my last question is, as we're having this significant turnover of staff, both for retirement and staff leaving to go to other schools or other jobs, what are we learning from exit interviews that may be helping inform the recruitment and the retention of our staff?
Lisa, do you want to answer that? Or because what we do right now is we're offering two types of exit interviews. We're doing, and Lisa, jump in at any time. We're doing the survey, and then we're offering virtual or in-person exit interviews. And so right now we are trying to collect that data. We are working with research and innovation to update that and then start pulling the data to look at it.
Okay, and then does that data get sent to the board?
We are working on creating a report for that. for that very thing. So we're on the same wavelength that we do want to report that out. I think there was a MMSD HR report, data report that was done last year or the year before that had the turnover rates in there or that data. if I'm not
Okay.
mistaken.
And then are there big picture patterns that you're noticing that are helping you to shift some recruitment and retention strategies?
Like I said before, we're just starting to look at it. Since I've been here a year, we've been kind of looking at those, looking at the data to try and group it and put it into a semblance of a report style.
Okay.
But yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Thank you for that.
Yeah, that is a really good question. And one thing that we are really focusing on as well, you know, we do recognize, and we're not just blaming it, but we do recognize this pandemic and how it has really contributed to staffing shortages for us. And it's a very difficult time for a lot of people, a lot of hardships that goes without saying. One thing that we are doing is we are trying to be very resourceful with our employee assistance program.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime we do any type of a staffing transaction, if it's a discipline transaction or a transaction with somebody with a medical need, we are trying to be very resourceful and provide that information to people. It's been a difficult time with this pandemic, and I think I don't want to lose sight of that. I'm coming new into the district. I've been in human resources for a very long time, and this is like something I have never experienced before. And we are working, you know, Tracy is her vision for us with the data to tell a picture, to paint a picture through data, is her vision is there, and we're getting there. And there's a lot of information that we intend to uncover.
Okay, I appreciate that. I want to make sure that we're taking these opportunities to learn how we can be doing better. You know, some of it is certainly related to stress from the pandemic, from the last couple of years, from the, you know, all of the different social stresses that we've all been going through. But then there's also, you know, some goes before that, some of the discontent. And so I think it's incredibly important that we collect that data, really, you know, and really look at it to learn what we can be doing better, to have that vision of the district being a place that is an ideal employer. So thank you.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you, Board Member Simkin and Board Member Nichols.
You're on mute, I think.
Yeah, I was having issues. I apologize. So one of the things, especially in light of tonight's conversation related to the budget, you've heard the board indicate strong support for being able to increase, you know, wage and really retain staff as well as attract. What I have not heard and I have not seen in the budget is anything that would be coming forward from human resources as a strategy around becoming innovative and maybe incentivizing, you know, kind of talent management for the future. So I'm wondering, and if you don't have an answer tonight, particularly as I'm hearing about districts just, you know, down the road that are doing sign-on bonuses and, you know, other incentives, are there things that you all from the human resources lens wish we were doing that have a budgetary impact? So again, you don't have to answer that tonight, but I'd be curious to hear more about kind of human resources as a talent management strategy and if there are budget implications. The other, that's more of a question statement. The other thing is, I don't know if I missed this, but it would be helpful, I think, for the board to have a sense of like the goal. So if you have X number of still unfilled or vacant positions, how many more are there to fill? And then like kind of where are we at a snapshot in time? And then how that looks over the course of a year. I appreciate your presentation, but it's hard for me to ascertain if we're looking good or not, in terms of, where we are in June. So at some point it would be helpful to kind of track that, maybe in more of a clear way. And then the last thing that I guess I'm curious about is, what is the current approach or strategy with HR to the principal relationship? Because I know principals were key parts of the HR strategy in terms of holding interviews and then them making maybe a recommendation. And then it used to come back to HR on who they had selected or wanted to extend offers to. What is the current strategy right now and relationship with principals in that hiring process?
Go ahead, Elaine.
And Michelle, thank you. I'd be happy to answer that. We still have that same process, Michelle. Each of us have our schools that we support directly. In addition, we also have departments that we support directly. And so we're working with those principals, department heads. We facilitate setting up interviews. We sit on interviews and if desired, we help development of interview questions. So our relationships with our principals are what we consider vital. And we are really their thought partner. And believe me, I'm supporting 17 schools right now, and I'm talking to my principals every day and multiple times throughout the day. I'm also supporting building services, food service, MSCR. So we are with our principals almost as closely as we can be. So that hasn't changed. And I for one, I like it. I think it's a great way that we can be right on the front lines with them. And as soon as we can get back into the schools on a more regular basis, that really grounds us, at least in my opinion. When I'm able to get out to the schools and be there and help be in the building, it puts me back into that place as to why we're here. We're here for the students. So.
And then also too, Carrie, before Carrie goes on, I want to say too that our principals have been very supportive. They've been in all the job fairs. They've helped with the interviewing, as Elaine said. I just wanted to throw that in there as well.
That's partly what I was going to say. I really like that you said we were thought partners. So full disclosure, I have not even yet been here a year, but it has been a great learning experience to learn from the principals. Some of them have been here quite a long time. And we have even bounced ideas off of each other for how they can help with recruitment. We had several shortage areas this year that I don't know how we would have gotten out of them without principal help. So we really are greatly partnered with each other to help. They were reaching out to their communities, parents, and we were doing our part, reaching out to schools. So without that partnership, I don't think we'd be in the place that we are right now. So that's at least from the analyst point of view.
Yeah, and I totally support that, Carrie, because many of my principals did a great job in filling their own positions with candidates that they had sought either from within their staff. Again, as you saw from the one slide, and I really want to point out that one of our best recruiting strategies is our own employment, is our own employees. And that really came through with our principals and our department heads.
Yes, so thank you so much for that. I mean, I appreciate hearing that the principals are still a key part of the hiring team. And I think what's hard to conceptualize in the slides that you had tonight is you show the process and how you're able to use, I think it's Cornerstone, to kind of see where everybody is in the process, which is great. What we can't see is kind of the duration of time that passes. And so one of the things that I'm hoping you all are working hard to mitigate is losing candidates in the process, because the duration of time from interviewing to getting through the background checks, all of the steps, they end up, moving on. So at some point, it would be great to also get some analysis of kind of average amount of days or weeks that it takes a candidate to get through a process, and any suggestions that you may have in the future for expediting or improving those processes. And like board member Simkin, I was also going to ask about exit interviews, but you've already responded to that. Ms. Carradine, do you think that the comment that I made about having a clearer sense of like what the goal is for hiring based on the number of unfilled positions and then kind of showing a snapshot in time is something that could be produced easily?
I'd have to look at it to see what Cornerstone provides, and then we can look at that, because we'll see what we have in there. And I think they do provide a timeline, but I'd have to look and see.
Are you talking about for the goal data? I'm sorry, I know I asked a couple of questions.
Yeah, so say that piece again. Are you talking about the duration of time, or are you talking about for the applicants? I just want to make sure.
Yes, so the time that applicants are in the queue before actually being given an offer, that's one piece. So then you're saying you can look into Cornerstone to see if that, or you all could do your own analysis on a start date of application to a end date of a job offer and come up with some amount of time. Okay, now I'm putting a pin in it. But my first question was around, is there a way for you to tell us what the hiring goal is on any given month based on how many vacancies we might have and our current status? So I'm just wondering if in the future, the data can be shared in that way.
I have to look and see.
Okay, thank you.
Look and see.
All right, appreciate it.
All right, but I added it to my notes of things to look at. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Board Member Nichols. Board President Muldrow.
Yeah, so I want to thank you for introducing us to your team. I have several questions, but I'm going to start with questions that are really specific to kind of where we're at in terms of numbers. So Lisa, you opened up by saying we sent out about 2,400 teacher contracts. As of today, we've received about 1,000 of those contracts, which means we have over 1,400 contracts that we are still waiting to have returned. And the deadline for those contracts is in 2 days. We got 48 hours where we're hoping to get more than half of the contracts. The other thing I think is really important to note is that on June 10th, that was the deadline for people who wanted to resign. So my first question is, by June 10th, what percentage or how many members of our faculty had resigned?
So Lisa, so with that, I don't know, were you writing it down? So we are working on that number of the ones that have resigned. For right now, we have 1,000 contracts back with 295 in the contracts mailbox, and they're still coming in. We're running a report actually tomorrow to get the total number of those who have resigned. So we'll have a number for you for that. We just didn't get that one today.
Okay, my second question is, this came to my attention over and over again this spring with folks who are applying for positions to sub, that folks were putting in applications, were submitting their information, were getting their transcripts, and we're not necessarily hearing back from HR. When somebody gets an application in, how much time goes by before they hear from HR?
Luke, do you want me to take that, or I can take that because no one from our sub office is here?
Yeah, I don't have that close of an interaction with the sub office. So if you have that information, that'd be great.
So what we do is in the sub office, so we actually have 3 people. We have one who's a QTI. So what happens is when they put their application in, we look at the application pool, we see where they are, and then we make phone calls, or we may send an email. And so now we're creating in Cornerstone where you can send an email at every step of the application process or that person. So the process is currently is that if they put an application in, then we'll look at it to see if it has everything that's required. If not, we'll either send an email or we'll give a phone call to say, hey, you're missing A, B, or C, and then move it on. So that's how we do it right now. So it's
how long does that process take, Tracy? Does that take 2 days, 3 days, 5 days?
Once they send the application in to get hired or to actually touch that application or that person.
To have that first initial either automated contact with HR or reach out from HR. I submit an application today. I should hear from you all within a week, within 2 weeks, within 24 hours. How long does it take before I know that HR has received my application?
So normally it takes, I'd say 2 to 3 days. It just depends because there's certain days. So they do it Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays, and in between time, they're working on the onboarding. So that's how they look at it right now, is that they have certain days that they look and then they come back around. So that way they're touching everybody. But usually it's no later than a week. So we don't go past a week. So it's within 1 week of once the application is put in.
Okay. And so thinking about the folks that are putting in applications and kind of how long it takes somebody from putting in an application to getting an interview to being hired, we're talking about hiring hundreds of people over the course of this next summer. I heard Elaine say that she's working with 17 schools. We have 53 schools and sites. So if one person has 17, that means you have 3 people managing staffing at the entire district, or 3 HR people who are paired with the entire district working with 17 schools each, meaning that each of those people are responsible for hiring or helping or supporting hiring hundreds of people across the district. Looking at how long it takes us to hire people and how many people we're trying to hire, what percentage of our vacancies are we actually planning to fill by, August 1st? And also looking at what Carolyn Stanford Taylor just brought to us, that's an additional 55 positions. So what is the timeline and breakdown? Should we know that we will have hired 300 people in June and 300 people in July, and then in August we'll be hiring another 300 and we'll still have, about 170 vacancies? What is the cadence and kind of capacity for hiring? When we look back over the last few months at our HR reports, we're hiring, 10 people a month and losing 60. So I have some real concerns about how we're going to leverage this summer to make sure that our schools are staffed fully and to capacity this fall. And I would really appreciate an outline of what that's going to look like this summer.
And we will be doing that. We'll be putting together a recruitment plan, but that is also part of the reason that I've asked for more analysts as well, because your breakdown is absolutely correct that we have, we actually have 5 analysts, 6 analysts that are working, trying to get this done to do exactly what you've just said. Exactly what you've just said. Coupled with, we have those working with the sub office as well. So yeah. So we are looking into that. That's why we're using Cornerstone. That's why we're creating these dashboards to give us an idea so we can keep track of what is going on and how that looks.
Tracy, to date, since you've been at MMSD, what is the most people you all have hired in a singular month? And I would assume that would bring us back to last year in the summer. So if you're looking at, here's when we've hired 500 people in the month, what were the conditions that allowed for you all to do that? Or, what is that highest month and how were you able to navigate that month?
Elaine, can you help with that?
I think it was August. I'm only laughing because that was my first month.
Yeah, August, we actually placed staff candidates into reg ed positions. But yeah, we'd have to look exactly on the numbers, but that would have been the highest month, that or the end of July. So July, August kind of timeframe.
And what created the conditions to expedite the hiring process in the month of August that allowed for you all to hire more people than we've seen in other months?
I think just the fact that we were looking at the day that school is going to be opening on, all staff day was August 25th. And so we needed to just really get out there and get our candidates and really get to we pinpointed schools that were behind in their hiring. And we really worked with them to identify candidates, and we just pushed through those offers as quickly as we could.
We were actually on the phone calling people on a list and offering them jobs right there.
I really hope that we're taking that level of urgency and approach this entire summer. I think that we need to be aggressively reaching out to people. And I also think that people move on to other districts, to other opportunities if they don't hear from us rapidly. And so making sure that we receive applications and are reaching out to people, you know, within 24 to 48 hours to schedule interviews and make sure that they have the materials necessary to become part of this district is something I'd like to see us do with incredible efficiency. And so I think the pressure was on last year in August, and the pressure is on right now. And I greatly appreciate the work you all are doing. I think it's spread between a very small group of folks. And at the same time, I think this board is invested in making sure that you all have the resources you need to be successful, because we cannot do school without educators. We cannot do school well without our support staff, without our administrators. So please let us know what we can do to support your efforts and champion this district, as well as what we can do to make this a great place to work.
I'm so glad that you said that. It's good to hear that as well. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Board President Muldrow. Board Member Vandermeulen, did you have a question or was it answered?
No, I forgot to take my hand off.
Okay, thank you. Not seeing any other hands. I just have a couple of quick questions or points. I guess I would just like to emphasize what has already been said by other board members. I am concerned about the volume of people that we need to hire. And looking back at the list that you gave us, the three biggest categories that you're dealing with right now are the 415 in review, checking qualifications and experience, the 863 that were in the interview process, and the 327 in the new applicant submissions that need review. So it kind of all comes back to the processes that we need to review and move people through these pieces of the HR hiring process. And like Board President Mulder said, we want to make sure that you have the resources that you need. I think Board Member Nichols asked a very good question. We don't see it attached in the budget. Like, what else do you need to make this work? Because having HR function and being able to get the most qualified staff in the door of our district is a priority for us. And so we want to make sure that the urgency is there and you are supported in the job that you are doing. Yes, because we need you obviously as a crucial piece of this process. So I would, like the other board members, Tracy, have requested, I would like to see the data on where we're at. Just like I need to understand better the number of people we're needing to hire and in what job categories they're in, so that, again, we can get a better picture of where we're at and where we need to go before we get to August. So I do really appreciate you coming to the board and talking to us tonight. You all are obviously very busy and it's getting late. So I appreciate you being with us here tonight.
Yes. And thank you for this opportunity. I just wanted to say that we do work every position that we do it with urgency. So I do appreciate that. President Muldrow, just answer your question. We had 126 resignations with 90 retirements as of June 10th, just to give that statistic. And so we are looking to do more recruitments and hiring for our department. And so thank you for that. It's good to hear that we have that support from the board. Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much. I don't see any other hands. Were there any other questions?
No.
All
And I
right.
just want to say thank you for this opportunity and to give an update, and that we will be giving a more in-depth report in the fall as well.
That sounds great. And then any of the information that you can provide us through the weekly updates and those continued reports, and yeah, the information that was requested tonight would be great.
Absolutely.
All
Absolutely.
right. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you all being here. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Moved with a second. Joanna, your advisory vote.
Yes.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? Seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for
Good night.
joining us, and have a good night.
You
Good
too.
night, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.